Escaping the cave.
And I'm getting really sick of guys named Todd.
Zilla X-Pod. Tonzilla X-Pod.
When you see the Southern Cross for the first time, you understand now why you came this way. 'Cause the truth you might be running from is so small, but it's as big as the promise of a coming day. Think about how many times I have fallen. Spirits are using me, larger voices calling. What heaven brought you and me cannot be forgotten. I have been around the world, looking for that woman girl who knows love can endure. And you know it will, yeah.
Like, I guess you can't see the Southern Cross in the northern hemisphere at all, can you? It's all like the
it's-
southern.
I think that's why they call it the Southern Cross.
Yeah, well, whatever. I never saw it. You saw it?
Yeah.
You never pointed it out to me.
I'm not very into stars. I can find the Big Dipper, and that's about it. And Orion's Belt, who looks drunk down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, somebody pointed out the Southern Cross to me, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
there it is.
So Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I got to mention this. We have to talk about the song a little bit. Southern Cross, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. The live version, I think, is a huge improvement over the original studio version, because the other one's just like, if you see the Southern Cross, it's really slow, and this one's got some thump to it. You know?
That was the last song?
Yeah.
What's this song?
This is my porn music.
Oh. Nice.
Anyway, this is the Escaping the Cave podcast. Up to a rip-roaring start today. Hey, the Tonzilla X-Pod. I'm on Google Play, also on iTunes. If you want to subscribe, appreciate it. Head on over there. Got a brand new feed, and you can get the links to that at escapingthecave.com. Also, I forgot to mention, I neglected to mention in the last episode, Chris, I'm on the Twitter.
It's great.
It's painful. At ETC Pod on Twitter. If you want to be one of my single-digit followers, I have 8 now.
Nice.
After a week.
Congratulations. Nice.
You know, a bunch of them are. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. Go over and like it and participate in the conversation. Participate in the discussion.
Are they going to tweet in?
I hope not. I don't have it open or anything. Anyway, joined by Chris Dyson one more time. Friar Chris, he was here the last episode. This is episode number 6, by the way. And I think we probably, depending on how much we get in here today, probably got another episode at least. Probably after this. I think we could fill that. I think what we're going to do today is I wanted to go back and head back about, 15 years for you. And start getting into some of the travel stuff, the domestic stuff. Some of the similarities, I guess, that we both experienced, maybe insights we both had, or I guess individually had about your walk across country and the hitchhiking and the traveling around the U.S. That we both have done, I guess, over the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. Right? The first thing, I guess, that comes to mind, the similarity that I think was kind of neat, I think, when we discovered it, was the fear. Mm-hmm. When you first conceptualized your walk, and I first conceptualized this idea of vanishing off on back roads with a backpack, 15 books, and a huge stereo that I could listen to right out in the middle of the woods. But it took me a long time to get going, and I was really surprised, I think, when we finally sat down and started talking about this, that you had conceptualized your walk cross country, which started in 2003, right?
Started in 2003.
Yeah.
If you really want to go back to when I first started thinking about it, I was like 11. And that was with my dad and I. My dad is a big camper and hiker and everything, and we wanted to walk across Massachusetts on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
And we had no idea what we were doing. So I think I've told you this story. We were used to car camping, and so he packed both packs, and we packed just a shitload of Dinty Moore canned beef stew in our backpacks.
Nice. Canned goods.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah, I weighed 60 pounds at the time.
Yeah. You did, not your bag. You actually weighed
Me,
it. Yeah,
I weighed 60 pounds. The bag probably did too.
Yeah, right.
And and we went out there, and I think we walked 10 miles. something like that, in the rain with ponchos on, and decided that was not.
This is horrible.
Yeah. But I will say my dad made the call. So
You didn't quit, he did, right?
yeah,
No,
well,
you're
you know,
11.
I was 11.
Yeah, he's the authority figure.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
He's my guardian.
So that planted the seed, but moving forward, I mean, when you're an adult now, I guess when did you actually decide to actually do it? When did it move from speculation and an idea, something you'd like to do in the future, to, you know what, I'm going to fucking do this?
Well, that was like 6 months before I actually did the walk. But so like when I was 11, I was really upset about quitting that walk.
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
Okay.
And that just somewhere along the line evolved into I'm going to walk across Massachusetts to I'm going to walk across the U.S.
Right.
So that was somewhere over middle school, high school. And then as high school came to an end and I was not interested in looking at colleges, I think I applied to one, or I know I applied to one. It was the only one I got into.
Yeah.
But I was taking a year off and I decided, okay, I'm going to walk cross country. And so that was 18. So that's what I kind of figure as any version of a realistic plan to go walk cross country. But then it didn't actually happen until I was 26
Right. So about
or 27, basically.
Yeah.
But
So 8-9 years between when you decided to do it, and a lot of that, some of that had to do with what?
well, being busy, I was in film school and had a career, but my excuse was always like, I don't know how to pack a pack.
Right.
That was the big one. I was like, I don't understand how to pack a backpack.
Yeah, that was mine. I used that for about 2 years.
And maybe, maybe that roots to the 11-year-old incident of packing it with Dinty Moore.
Right.
But I kept picturing like, being off in, Kansas or Wyoming or someplace like that and being without something that I desperately need for survival. And the clincher was I was dating a girl when I was 26. She was 19. She was taking a year off of college in between her first and second year at Columbia. And she kept telling me, she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to go live in this house in Ohio with a friend of mine. I was like, that sounds awful.
Ohio.
Like, why?
Yeah.
I was
So
like,
you're going to Ohio on purpose.
well, yeah. I was like, why are you doing that? Well, you should come walk cross country with me. And she was kind of a Kerouacian kind of fan, that kind of. Well, she was going to Columbia, and her and her friends kept arguing who had the room that Kerouac was actually in because they figured they were in his dorm. And so she was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And I think her agreeing to do it was kind of the same mentality of me wanting to do it when I was 18. It was kind of like, yeah, like
Sure.
sort of serious about it, but not making any moves toward doing it.
Right.
But me, I took it seriously. I just quit my film career. I'd been out of college. I didn't know what I was doing. I was working in coffee shops, and so that became my project was, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. And that's what made it serious for me was it took somebody else to want to do it with me.
Right.
To then make me, I made all the arrangements, all the plans. I saved the money and bought all the gear and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't have done it probably without her deciding that she wanted to do that walk with me. It was like an outside motivator.
Somebody else kind of holding you accountable as well.
Who wasn't at all.
Yeah,
but
right.
in my mind,
Yeah, it might have been a sort of a two-way street with that as well. She committed to it and thinking, well, he'll probably back out, and you didn't. And she maybe it was a case where she didn't want to be the one either who, decided not to go.
Well, I mean, she was excited about it when we did go. I mean, we did leave. She walked through Georgia with me.
Yeah.
Over like 2 months.
Yeah.
And
that's pretty. That's still. I mean, a lot of people listening. You walked across Georgia.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not.
That's not a small. Yeah, that's not a small deal. At all.
I'm not sneering at it at all.
Right.
No, it was a great time. Then we broke up shortly after that. Or she was hurt. She wrenched her knee.
Yeah.
And actually made it another like 400 miles on this wrenched knee.
Wow.
She made it to Sewanee, Tennessee, before we got to a friend of mine's house, and she flew out from there, out of Nashville. And then the rest of it,
I know that when I was putting my stuff together, and it took me about 4 years to get from concept, this idea that I came up with in the stream of consciousness writing. I went into that in another episode, I think, probably 2 back from this one, I think. I'd never heard of Chris McCandless. I'd never heard of any of the, the folks that a lot of people that we run into sort of deify at this point. But I had this thought. I'm like, my radio career was on life support at this point. I was raging every time I went into this radio station down there in Florida. And I was like, I fucking hate this. I feel like such a fucking whore every time I go in there, you know? And we were getting ready, or I was coming to the point where I was getting ready to just basically move on to something else. And I had no idea what the hell that was going to be. You know, I'd put, by that point, almost 10 years into radio. It was what I did. It's my skill set, right? And in my early 30s at this point, I'm going to start over.
Right.
And I had this idea. I was sitting there writing and pictured of me in a backpack, like I said, with a bunch of books. And I thought I was going to walk out maybe into southern Georgia or Alabama. You know, we lived in the Florida Panhandle at that point.
With a bunch of books.
It's the Dinty-Moore.
I've seen you do it.
Yeah. Not with one book. I only took one book.
Oh, really?
Don Quixote. Yeah, I went into that too. The thing that got me in the beginning was that it took me 4 years to get out there because I imagined everything, including what you mentioned, you know, like being stranded someplace, needing something that I couldn't get my hands on, basically for survival or whatever. And I was, you know, thinking of all these people who were going to be out to rob me or get me or kidnap me or throw me off a mountain or whatever. I mean, there was there were everything you could possibly imagine. I did, and it hamstrung me. For a number of years. I was never prepared enough because I would always come up with something else, you know, that would keep me from doing it that I had to get ready for.
Yeah, I always had some other option too.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I was in college for a while, so I didn't even really think about it over that time, except talking about it to people over drinks.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that happened too, because I kept doing radio. I found when we got out to Colorado, about a year later, I guess. In fact, I took a full-time radio job in Taos when we moved down to New Mexico, taking that gig. And then when we got to Denver, I was still doing part-time radio, driving from Denver to Breckenridge. I found the Rockies gig at the ballpark doing camera. You know, I had other things going on that didn't really put this front and center for me until the morning show thing ended in Santa Fe.
Right.
It was like this point. No more of this. I am not going to do this again. And I tried to find other work and everything. Nothing was happening in Santa Fe. I'm like, fuck this. I joined the Carney thing.
Well, no, I think it's important to mention that you taking the radio gig, me taking this bartending gig yesterday.
Yeah.
Or going back to coffee shops and, you know, that kind of thing. When I quit film, 99, I quit film and left and went to Denver. Came back and was not interested in getting into the film gig. Took up some shitty coffee shop job in Brooklyn, and the first mention of a film job that I could get, I jumped back on it and did it again for another 6 or 7 months. Yeah,
safe. And you know what you're doing, right?
Safe. It's familiar. You know how to live that way, and I think that's an entrapment. How it buys into this whole fear thing that we're talking about. This idea of like, you want to break out of your life. Yeah. You got to break out of those strings, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you got to take those risks, I guess, but
you can't keep reading the same chapter expecting a different outcome. I guess crutching on, old things and going either the things that distract you and kind of keep you from, or at least kept me, and it sounds like you, the old familiar sort of lures back into the comfort or at least secure life that keeps you from, back in 03 with you, going down to you started in Savannah, right? And actually getting on however you got to Savannah and actually taking those first few steps, the things that kind of stop you from doing that. With me, it was, like I said, it was radio. It was I had familiar options,
right?
Until that last gig ended. It became really apparent that this is not. I'm going to either drink myself to death,
right,
or I'm going to end up.
It's easy to stay in those.
Yeah. Before I left. Like I said, I was creating, I had these, our buddy Eric, the Dutchman, he has this, he told me about his idea about stories, these internal narratives that we like to tell ourselves and scare ourselves with, and, and I had an innumerable amount of these things beforehand. Everything was going to kill me, or I was going to starve, or I was going to run out of water. I needed to carry 15 gallons of water just because. And the thing that I found out when I left, when you dropped me off in 2008, one of the very first things that I wrote in my journal was that everything I was fucking worried about was ridiculous. It was like a little molehill that I turned into Kilimanjaro.
Right.
You get out there, you start, you take the first few steps, and all of a sudden it's not speculation anymore. Because once you get going, once your feet start moving, you're in the present. You're in the moment. And you just figure it the fuck out.
Right.
You don't sit there and try to plan every fucking step. For me, anyway, I changed directions 4 times a day. I couldn't sit there and, I was aiming to I was headed toward Nebraska.
Right.
And I thought I was going to go east.
Right. You ended up right outside of Utah, didn't you?
Yeah, I ended up in Montrose riding with a cop killer, but Dennis, and you get there, you get in the moment, and then life starts to happen, and you adjust, you improvise, and it's sort of like that old the improv rule, the rule of agreement. You don't sit there and just try to, this is a skill I haven't
that
quite
you can't
learned.
say no.
I haven't learned that yet, but it's an idea, it's a concept anyway. You just take what comes, you adjust to it. If you need water, you go get water. We're not in sub-Saharan Africa here.
Right.
You can get water just about. And I don't know how many hours I spent thinking myself into knots and how much gear I bought to filter water.
Right. Well, and that's why, like, when we were hitching in 10 or 11 or something like that, I started going really minimalist.
Yeah.
Remember, I started switching into, like, wait a second, I keep buying these big bags and then I keep filling these big bags.
Yeah, right.
And I don't need to do that. I'm pretty resourceful.
Yeah.
I stopped carrying. Remember, you were picking on me for a little while for not carrying a sleeping pad anymore, which was not the best. Well, I don't know. If I went back out hitching again, I would probably continue to not carry a sleeping pad because, I just carried a tarp, which was far more versatile, and I could throw it on top of sagebrush, and that worked as the loft that I needed, and it was relatively comfortable when you're comparing that to like rocks and snow. So
okay, yeah.
But I mean, no, I think it's
the 8-ounce sleeping pad, the 8-ounce Thermarest. For me, for the insulation and the ease of just sticking it under there and not having to go find cardboard.
It's just interesting because how many times have I learned this lesson that you do take that first step out and then I mean, for me, the 2 things you need to get going is you need a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. Doesn't matter if it moves. It's just like the walk across country. It was Seattle,
right?
I don't know what it was on the hitch. That goal was just following the gut. So that was like a much hazier light at the end of the tunnel, but it was like, it felt like something to follow, I guess. It's that string in the dark.
Yeah.
And then you just need to see where the first few, like first 2 or 3 steps.
I always equated those goals and those destinations, the light at the end of the tunnel. Occurred to me later on that was bait. It was something to look at to get you out the door and set you, at least psychologically, set you in a direction. But once I got out there, every time the trip never looked like it was supposed to in the end. I mean, it's where the plans thing came in on the blog that I used to write up, because I took a trip in actually going back to 2008, Santa Barbara. I took a train out there. The goal was to see the Pacific Coast Highway.
Right.
You get there it is, and you go.
Right.
And everything just sort of sets itself up after that. It's so pointless, at least in that situation. I'm not saying you shouldn't set goals and you shouldn't walk toward a specific goal. If you had a goal of Seattle, you weren't going to be aiming and shooting off toward Guadalajara.
But look at like the course of these trips that I've done. Like the walk cross country was my first like major trip, right? There I had a hard goal. I had a hard form as to how I wanted to get there. Yeah. I had rules for myself and all these things. And that was to just get me out of the shell of like, well, I don't have an apartment or like, things like this around me. Yeah. But then you get into the next thing was, I don't know, I guess you jump up to the hitch, hitching around, where it's like, I didn't have a hard goal. I had this strange, like, okay, I'm following my intuition, and that seems like that's going to lead me to the community that I think I'm going to have. And it did. I had no idea where it was or what it would look like, but I think I say that sense of like bait, or that's why I say that light, you need that light at the end of the tunnel. And it's irrelevant whether it moves around, because, and I think that's important to say because it has to be able to move around, Yeah,
you can't be rigid and monolithic about it, because life changes. Yeah, people change.
Right.
And things happen. You've got to I think you got to have that flexibility, even if you're not talking in terms of traveling. If you're talking about stepping off, there's a metaphor involved here. If you're talking about stepping off and starting a business or something like that, it's always the what ifs. Well, what if it fails? What if this happens? What if this happens?
Right.
What if that? After the first step, you've got to be, I think anyway,
you have to be flexible,
and you've got to be able to improvise and adjust to whatever life throws at you. It's not too completely dissimilar to this at all. I don't
No, and like where I'm going now is I'm coming out of Peru with this goal, this light at the end of the tunnel of like, okay, now I want to get land.
think. Right.
And I have a hazily clear concept of what I want to do. But yeah, I'm pretty flexible of that down to the core goals of what I know that I want, which I don't know, those are probably even flexible.
Sure.
But a home, I want a community. I feel like it's really important for me to learn how to stay in one spot, which would be a major achievement in my life. Yeah, I think those are the important things that I'm after, and whatever it looks like is how it comes out. That's why when people ask me what's this business plan for the land coming up, it's like, well, I'll tell you the kind of vague goal, and I recognize I come off as flaky, but you know what? I'm not looking for a bank loan, so.
Right, yeah. That's true. Yeah. This kid Jordan that I met down in Phoenix about a year and a half ago was on the West Coast trip just before.
Oh, in the bus station?
Yeah, before Oompa Loompa became president. His very first trip out. And I don't know how much thought and effort and how many stories he had told himself and how long it had taken him to get there. But he was obviously kind of shitting himself at the bus station because he was in Phoenix. He was going to Flagstaff. It was pretty late in the year. It was like late October in Flagstaff.
Yeah.
It's not exactly warm. But he was taking a bus up there. He was going to get off the bus in Flagstaff, and he had no idea where he was going. I liked him immediately.
Nice.
Kind of gave a brief background on the stuff that I'd done, at least. And he just had a ton of questions. He's like, what about this? And what about this? What if this happens? What if this happens? I was like, dude, I wish I had run into me in this situation, like 10 years ago. Calm down, take a breath, step off the bus, quit trying to figure everything out. Because it's going to fucking change anyway. There's no way you can figure all this shit out. You cannot prepare for every eventuality that's going to be thrown your way. And most of the ones that are scaring you won't happen.
Right.
And the ones that you need to worry about, you have no concept of. And you're going to have to learn to figure out and adapt on the fly. Calm yourself down.
Right.
Have a drink. Go have fun.
Yeah, and most of the preparations you make for the ones you are thinking of that do happen, you either prepared wrongly or
you don't know what you're doing.
Right,
You're
exactly.
doing it in your fucking living room.
Yeah.
That's how I, when I left, when you dropped me off at Jackson Lake State Park, 60 pounds, I got Don Quixote and electric clippers in my bag. I thought I had to prepare to cut. Yeah. And I thought I had to prepare to cut my hair, and I wanted this book, and I thought it would inspire me and everything. And a quarter mile down the road, I'm feeling every fucking comfort item in that bag. I don't need this. This is fucking heavy. This is fucking stupid. Why am I carrying bananas? They're just getting squished on the side of my bag anyway. And thank God I left the phone in the car because I let I like to think that either Jesus or the universe was toying with me and pulled the cell phone out of my pocket and onto the floor of the car. So you would have to come back and bring my cell phone back, and I could throw all of that extra shit into the trunk of the Saturns, and I lightened myself up probably 20 pounds.
Yeah, the Ingrid and I, when we got dropped off in Savannah, we just hit a dumpster.
Yeah.
It was like a dumpster in a post office.
How much extra shit did you have?
From what we dumped the first day, it was probably about 20 pounds. But let's not forget that I brought my 12-year-old fat black cat who we did not dump in a dumpster.
Thank God. Thank you.
Yeah. No, she stayed on the back. I even made her a little shelter out of my little rain jacket and tent poles.
You
And
had pictures of that at one time.
No, I still got those. Yeah. And that was 3 days in. That was after she'd been suffering in Georgia heat for 3 days, sitting on top of my pack. Fortunately, the friend who had dropped us off in Savannah was down in Florida and for a week. And so we walked about 6 days, and then I called her. And, when you're walking and you're just starting out walking, I think we were doing an average of maybe 8 to 10 miles a day.
Yeah.
And we started in Savannah, which is maybe 10 miles east of the highway. So we had to walk. Our first day was walking all day and getting under the highway. And I think we camped under the highway the first night. So we were maybe 50 miles off the highway. So she just came over, picked up the cat, and went home.
Took you 6 days to get there. It took there 45 minutes to drive over there, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember 2 months into it, we ran into these two guys who had broken down on the side of the road with a boat. And we're just walking along. Hey, hey, you all right? You need any help or anything? We got a phone. And
Yeah, right.
yeah, this is 2003. So,
Yeah, good deal, man.
yeah, I was like,
We got one of these.
yeah, hey, we can call home. And we started talking with them. They're like, where'd you guys come out of? We're like, oh, Savannah. And they're like, we just came from there like 7 hours ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and we'd been walking a month or two or something like that.
I always hated that because I started out with the idea of walking back in 08. And I was going to do a lot of walking in my head anyway. And I quickly figured out with Dennis that my sweet spot was hitching. That's
Right.
where I was finding whatever it was that I needed to find. It wasn't really, I liked walking, but it was good for me to get rides. And I figured that I always got a kick out of like spending a day walking somewhere or spending several hours trying to get somewhere, and you get in a car and sometimes they go back, to take you
Right.
which way you're going, if you want to go south or whatever, just whatever. Every now and then that happens. And it's like, I just spent 8 fucking hours doing this, and this guy got me here in like 15 minutes.
Right, yeah.
All that effort, and he's sitting in here with his air conditioner blowing on him, listening to AC/DC.
Yeah, see, that never bothered me at all.
doesn't,
I
but
found
no-
it annoying. I found it amusing.
I wouldn't say it annoyed me,
Yeah.
but it really highlighted
Yeah.
what I was doing.
Oh, for
that
sure.
That front and center that I'm doing this the hard way.
Yeah, we spent a week in Statesboro. That was like the first time that we really stopped down Georgia. Well, I spent a week in Statesboro. Ingrid went home for her sister's graduation, her grandmother's 90th birthday or something like that. Anyway, so I was just there on my own, and I ended up making friends with people, and they're driving me around all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going like 2 days back and
Oh,
2
yeah.
days forward, get previews of the land and all this kind of
That's
stuff.
kind of neat.
Yeah, it was fun.
Actually, you can make a little psychological topographical map of knowing where you're going to be heading and kind of psychologically preparing yourself
yeah.
where you're going. Looking
Well,
for
like-
camping spots.
Yeah, like when we were walking along, I was like, I'm pretty sure there's a convenience store up here.
Yeah.
This is, of course, long before smartphones.
Oh, yeah. Go on a little bit more about that, because you were doing this in 03, and I think over the course of 2 summers, correct, to finish it. So you started off in Georgia. It took, a month to get across Georgia?
2. Yeah. I had told Ingrid was my girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And she was the one, like I say, was the catalyst, basically, that made me take the walk seriously and plan it and actually do it. But when we were doing that and I was saving up money, I was saying, okay, well, let's budget this out at $1 a mile. We'll walk 20, 25 miles. We got $20, $25 to spend, right? And that worked out pretty well when it was just me. But I also said I'd like to average like 10 miles a day.
Right.
What I meant by that was like I'd like to walk 20, 25 miles a day and then, meet some cool people, chill out, hang out with them, whatever. She took that to mean she's not going to walk any more than 10 miles a day. So there were times where like pushing to make
10
10
miles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like 3 hours and 20 minutes of walking.
Yeah.
I walked a pretty steady 20 miles, 20 a mile in 20 minutes.
It's a nice leisurely day, though.
Yeah. Well,
Real
we stopped a lot
leisure.
for soft serve because down in Georgia, it's like 69 cents for a cone.
In the heat.
Yeah.
That's got to be glorious.
Oh, that was every time we saw one.
Yeah.
We stopped.
How'd you find the South?
Great. I mean, everyone was super hospitable. I'd say Georgia, we were put up the most than any other state. I mean, we also spent the most time in that state.
Yeah.
Tennessee took me, I was on my own in Tennessee. I took 17 days to get through that. I think I camped out 7 of them.
Houses the rest of the time, or like people's
Houses
yards?
there was a ranger house one night, but the rest were people putting me up or something.
Just to give like the sort of the nuts and bolts basics of you were carrying a tent, so you were stealth camping, or you didn't even stealth camp, did you?
There I was, but the whole idea was I didn't know what, I mean, like, I'm a Yankee, so
Right.
I was terrified about the Southern cops. Well, and this goes back to that fear thing, actually. So I don't like snakes at all, and I know the South is full of them. Southern cops were freaking me out. Those were the really main thing. Rednecks also I was kind of
Sure.
worried about.
Well, that's why I asked about the South, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people they have this. I have the same exact stereotype in my head. I'm not really afraid. I'm more of a spider guy. You know that,
Right, yeah.
But yeah, rednecks and cops. Remember Ray? We talked to a guy. I feel like I'm getting completely off, but a guy we met at Slab City in 2010. He was actually walking for a cause at this
He was
point.
trying to break the world record.
Yeah, few
I think
other
he
things.
did break the world record.
Nah, he didn't
he?
get there. His hip fell apart on him up in like Oregon. But anyway, he was going through the South, and I think he got robbed down there. He was out in the middle of nowhere, and he said some good old boys pulled off, said, "Well, we're going to be taking that away from you." They were really friendly about it, but they basically took a whole bunch of shit off his back. And that's the kind of I've heard that a few times. You know what I mean?
No, we didn't have any problems.
Yeah,
like
that's why I was asking how the stories and maybe the preconceived notions about the stereotypes that you may run into in the South, how it compared to what you actually found.
Well, I mean, everyone's experience is going to be different, obviously.
Sure. No, I'm asking you though. You're at my microphone.
Right. No. I'm prefacing it with that. With
Yeah.
I did have I had only one situation that I can think of where we felt threatened, and that was. Fuck, I don't remember where that was, but it was down in Georgia, and we were looking for a place to camp, and we went up into some construction site. I think it was outside of Atlanta. There were woods up there. It was pretty hilly. It looked like an easy place to kind of like pop our tent up because back then, we were just finding brush and hiding out in the brush and pitching our tent and camping out. And anyways, we got up over a hump and found a homeless camp in there.
Oh yeah.
And there was a dude in there. He looked like James Brown. He was just real slick.
Yeah.
He had that same kind of
yeah.
like, I don't know what they do when you like straighten out. They straighten the kinks out of their hair and they like grease it back and everything. He had that going on. So
And he was a homeless guy.
yeah.
How was he
I mean, he was
slicking?
living in a pretty sweet pad.
Was he slicking that shit back?
He had a pretty sweet.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sweet
nice setup.
little like bunker set up in there. I mean, this was a entrenched homeless like kind of camp, like a gypsy camp.
Tent city.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
it was tucked away in the woods.
Yeah.
And he welcomed us with a real big smile, and immediately I don't want to speak for. Well, I'm pretty sure Ingrid didn't trust him either, but immediately we were kind of like, okay, like me, I'm pretty open. Trusting kind of person, and trusting with a, with an edge to it. So however you want to put that, I don't know. Anyways, I was open to the idea that maybe he wasn't as shady as I was assuming that he was because of my like feeling for him. But yeah, I mean, it just like I was keeping an eye on him for sure. But taking him at his word of like, no, you can come stay here and this is cool. And we're like, okay. And we're looking at it and we're looking at him. And I just kind of like, I don't know, we were with him maybe 5 minutes or something like that. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You guys seem pretty cool over here. So we're going to, we'll keep on going and we'll find somewhere else. So, but thank you for the invite, whatever. And we took off. And as we're walking away, Ingrid's like, yeah, he was checking out your, like different things on my pack, like the
at your boots,
camelback
maybe.
and stuff. Yeah, I don't know what he was looking at.
I
But
ran into a guy in Maryland, and this was relatively recent. This was I think 2012. I'd been dropped off in Cumberland late afternoon, and it was like I took this late ride. I usually use, I don't usually typically hitchhike around dark because it's hard to find a place to sleep after dark, right? Especially if you get dropped in an urban area. Anyway, I did. I took this ride. It was the very first ride of this little stretch, and got dropped off in, I don't know, somewhere around Winchester. I don't think it's Winchester, but whatever, around there. Yeah, and get dropped off at a gas station, going to get a pack of cigarettes. Was I smoking then? I don't know. I went in to get a pack of something.
Right.
And I come out, and there's this guy there who was, like you said, I mean, he was real friendly.
Right.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, buddy?
Right.
And by then, my bat signal had been, or my spidey senses, I guess is what I call them. They were blaring because I'd been out enough, and I know that when somebody's that fucking enthusiastic and that friendly and that welcoming, watch out.
Right.
They're trying, and he was looking me up and down, and he was telling me that he had a place to camp right up these railroad tracks, like 100 yards up these railroad tracks, man. You come on back here with me. You come on back here with me. And I'm like, that's really nice. You want a pack of cigarettes? Here you go. That's what it was. I went in and bought him a pack of cigarettes just to kind of get him like,
get
leave
him
me the
off,
fuck up. You got something, go away now.
Right.
And, but he was really aggressive about it. I mean, too aggressive. And I'm pretty sure that had I went back there, either I would have been hit with something and
you would have been looted,
or I would have woke up the next morning and my shit's gone. Either way, And I went as far. I mean, I was,
Probably both.
yeah, I was pretty paranoid because I hadn't hitchhiked in a while at this point. It was my first trip in probably 2 years. So I wasn't really salty yet, but I was sharp enough to keep my head on a swivel.
Right.
And I walked the opposite way. I went the wrong way down this road, far enough to get away where I was out of line of sight, crossed over, walked through a little patch of woods, behind another building, through a hotel parking lot, jumped the fence to the interstate where I'd gotten off, and hopped over the on-ramp, and then went out on the other side of the woods next to the highway, always like, is he behind? You know, just, is he back there? No.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
I went through some special ops shit to avoid this one fucking guy that I probably could have beat up anyway.
No, well,
I had
I mean,
to.
that's kind of like what we did in Georgia. So, like that guy, I feel like I should redefine the way that I approach this guy because it sounds like I was giving him a shot in the beginning. Basically, I was being friendly.
Right.
And
You have to.
my concept has always been like, I'll be friendly to whoever.
Sure.
As soon as I saw somebody over there, we weren't staying there. It was just figuring out the polite way to opt out.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We had no consideration of staying there. You know?
It's me with the cigarettes. You're trying to be polite and friendly and
Yeah.
make sure you're
like
not
he offered
having-
us food, and it's like, no. You know, like, well, I don't know what's in the food.
Well, you can take that either way. Well, I gave you food. What are you giving me? That could. I've seen shit like
Right,
that happen.
shit like that can happen.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, we played it off. No, cool, thanks, you know. But when we left, so this was a hilly country. We were getting in the foothills of the Appalachians there.
Yeah.
And we saw that it wasn't just this guy there. This is the whole camp, right? We knew it was a whole camp. He said, like, you know, oh, there's more down in there. You can camp down in there. It's cool.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how far this camp extended. So when we left, we went over, and, you know, it's sunset. We needed to find a place to stay soon.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I didn't know how far that camp sprawled, and I didn't know if word was spreading to keep your eyes out to
Yeah.
see where they duck in.
Right.
So that was the only night that we slept with a knife under the pillow.
I can see that.
Yeah. And we only had a knife because the last guy that we had stayed with insisted that we take 2 knives.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still have those knives. They're rusted as shit, but they were like, you know, they're little souvenirs or whatever.
Yeah.
But I didn't like carrying a knife on me. I think I ended up mailing them home out of Missouri or something like that.
I always did. I still do.
Yeah.
Always. Remember that I have this Smith & Wesson knife that I got the very first trip on my way to your place. Picked it up in Pueblo, Colorado, on the way from Santa Fe to Denver.
Yeah.
And it's heavy. It's like a full pound. I mean, it's a heavy-ass knife, but you can use it. It's not like I think I'm a special ops badass or something. But I always have carried either that or a smaller one because I figure if you're in a situation, it's stupid in my head. I mean, I understand completely where you're coming from, and I agree with that to a great degree because if you're carrying something, you better use it,
Right.
or you're going to wear it. One way or another, it's either going to be in your back or on, cracked over your head. But I've always carried this thing because I figure if I grab it, even if I don't open it, and even if I don't want to, it's heavy enough where I can hit him on the head with it,
Right.
or at least partially defend myself
Right.
a little bit. And, it might work, I don't know, on a dog.
Right.
If you're being, mauled by, a
Right.
Pomeranian.
Yeah.
Something. But I've always...
Oh, no, I had dogs come after me on the walk for sure.
Yeah, I never had to deal with that as much as you did because of the hitching.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's always like, I always wanted that there. I typically don't even take it out of the backpack now unless I'm in a really sketchy situation. But the first year, maybe 2,
Right.
I always had it where I could get my hand on it just because you don't know.
Right.
But nothing never had to use it.
No, I just didn't even want to carry it. I mean, I had a knife on me. I had a Leatherman.
Yeah,
But-
that's a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I had it. It was not a weapon. I never thought of it as a weapon and never would have tried to use it as a weapon.
Before we move on from that camp thing, the thing I was thinking of that it reminded me of, and I wonder what the psychological difference is. It reminds me of Slab City. How you were describing this homeless camp.
Yeah,
That it's,
probably was.
and psychologically, I guess maybe it's because we knew what to expect in Slab City.
Well,
What's the
I mean,
difference?
this place compared to that place, one, I never heard of it before.
Right.
Whereas Slab City I had.
Right?
So yeah, psychologically, I think that does a lot.
Yeah.
Also, I think environmentally, it was in a hilly forest that's tucked away.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Slab Cities is
Wide open.
in a desert. There's still no one around who's going to stop anything. But psychologically, again, I think that wide openness
Yeah.
makes you feel like you have a chance.
Yeah. At least you can see. You think you can see who's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
right. Yeah, and they're not hiding in the shadows, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, it's weird though.
And you can also see the size of it.
Yeah.
I think seeing the size of it has a big effect because you can tell how big a community it is.
Yeah.
And you kind of have an idea of what kind of people are there, which Slabs, I think, is rainbow people, like gun-toting preachers who we ran into. And
Gun running.
Yeah, exactly. and snowbirds coming down from the north,
$1 million motorhomes running on solar power with these fugitives that have run away from something.
Right.
Over here, living next to each other.
And I think there's something to being able to see all of it. There's also a community spirit there.
Yeah.
I mean, you had like weekly shows, you have social clubs, there's an infrastructure there which shows intention and design.
Right.
You know, even if it's rudimentary. Whereas this homeless camp is, I don't know anything about it. I don't know what's there. All I know is that it's shacks put up, you know? Yeah. And I don't know why. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know anything about them. I can't see any kind of intention or infrastructure there, or if it's just people banding together loosely or tightly. I don't know.
I wonder how the reaction would have been. I know this is an abstract thought and it takes a little imagination, but if you were like walking, I don't know, through whatever road that is that goes through Nyland next to the Salton Sea, and you happen to take a little detour and stumbled upon Slab City, not knowing what the hell it was. I wonder how that...
I probably wouldn't have stayed.
Yeah, Slabs? Yeah, I
don't think so.
I don't think I would have either.
I mean, maybe with Leonard's like welcome.
Yeah.
It looks like a Christian camp if you didn't know any better.
That would have run me out. I'm not saying
it wouldn't have scared me. Yeah, it would have...
I just wouldn't want to be there.
No, but if I was looking for a place to stay, I'm fine to stay in a Christian camp. I can play that role for a little while. I know you can't.
No, I did. I did up in Fort Morgan. I had to stay at that halfway house when the tornadoes came
right.
through.
Okay.
That was basically a Christian. He was trying to save me.
Right, yeah.
He was all right.
I've told you that a million times of like, and we've talked about this a million times of like figuring out that translation between, I mean, like for me, the hitching was pilgrimage. You know, it was like following my gut, following this intuition. That's pilgrimage. You know, it was kind of for spiritual reasons. We were talking about synchronicity, energy flow, all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, in a lot of ways, I see that as a pilgrimage.
Yeah, I guess. You know, I am projecting my current mindset, I think, to back then. I think maybe had I stumbled upon Slab City and seen, Salvation Mountain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably would have approached that like I did in Randleman.
Right, and just see it as bed.
Yeah, either that or, why is this here?
Right, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
we were always about.
I mean, like what Leonard had going on was kind of interesting, anyways.
No, it's fantastic. He's talking about
weird.
He's talking about Leonard Knight, by the way. He's dead now. I think he died in 2011.
I don't know,
something like that. Maybe a little.
Weren't we there in 20? No, we were there in 2010.
No, he died in 2014. That's what it was. And he's if you've seen the movie Into the Wild. He's featured in that. He's the crazy guy building not crazy. Yeah, he was a little nutty.
He was very emphatic about love.
He was eccentric. But he was the guy that was building the big tribute to God in the California desert at Slab City, the old guy. And that was actually him featured in the movie. He played
talking his real philosophy.
Yeah, he was talking to. Yeah, he was not acting. Yeah, he was talking to a camera. Somebody had asked him a question, and that is exactly who he was.
Well, knowing Leonard, he might not have even known the camera was there.
Yeah. The funny thing about that, though, I mean, I have a really great. I have some video of you with Leonard. I think the sound might be messed up, but I've still got that, and I've got some pictures of you with him where you were seeing because Chris decided to volunteer and help. Clean up after a tropical, like a
flooding.
That
snowstorm that my aunt and I got stuck in. Up in Big Bear.
Yeah,
was a flood.
Turned into rain
in the desert.
Over the desert there, and Chris volunteered to help Leonard clean up his place there for a little while. But yeah, that was a really fascinating thing. And the interesting thing that I took out of Leonard was he was, like I said, he was featured Into the Wild. Mm-hmm. Chris McCandless stayed at Slab City, I guess, over the course of a
month or two or something.
Over the course of a winter, I think it was maybe 3 or something like that. Leonard had no idea who he was. He's that guy that died in a van up in. I heard him say this. I'm not making this up. Somebody had asked him about that. No.
Well, I mean, how could he? It's like, does he remember us?
I mean, no, absolutely not. But it's
made the same thing he was.
I understand that. Intellectually, I understand that. But I think most people, I don't know. I'm not going to say most people. I think there are some people that think that McCandless was a celebrity. Maybe when he was there, that he made such a huge impression on everybody at Slab City. So they're gonna, you know what I mean? They're gonna think that. Well, Leonard, what was he like? I don't fucking know.
Well, that's the funny thing about Into the Wild with like Chris McCandless and all that. Is like it's a character sketch on a type of person that he used McCandless for.
Krakow?
Krakow, yeah. I mean, like, even if you read the book, McCandless is not really. I mean, he's kind of like the center thread, but he's not what the book's about. I wouldn't say. You know, I mean, he cuts away to that dude in the 30s who disappeared in Utah. He's talking about himself a lot of the time. This guy, Chris McCandless, fits.
Yeah.
You know, and is a modern day version of this archetype. And that's what the book is Krakauer wanting to talk about this archetype that he feels like he fits into.
Sure. Yeah.
And has finally found some sort of articulation of this archetype of what he fits into.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that have, I don't want to go too far into McCandless. I mean,
I don't either, but I'm just saying, like, Into the Wild, the movie was more, that's like about Chris McCandless. It's very different from the book.
There are a few movies out there, a few documentaries anyway, I've seen at least 2 of them, that have debunked a lot of both Krakauer and Sean Penn's interpretation of this, and some of the information, like they found his backpack up in Alaska. He had $300 in it. He had all these, he was not running around eating dandelions off the side of the road to survive. He had money, and he was plugged into society. He had worked at...
he worked at McDonald's for like 6 months in the first...
And an Italian restaurant. He was a waiter in Vegas, too.
Right.
He figured out relatively early, I think, that the idea of living without money, and I figured this out myself, and I think you did to a certain extent as well,
for
that
sure.
You cannot live in this society without money.
Right.
You will die.
Well, you remember...
Or you'll be a thief.
No, well, and I think that goes well into, like, remember when I started The Hitch? I was of this mindset of, like, I want to learn how to live without money.
Yeah.
And the way that I did it was, saved up $3,000. It was in 2009, so it was right after the crash. And I didn't trust the banks at all. And I didn't, I kept having these apocalyptic ideas of like, inflation's going to go crazy. I was seeing like Weimar Republic, Germany, of like wheelbarrowing.
Yeah, this is 2009.
Right.
So yeah, 2012 is right around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I remember I bought gold and silver with with $1,000. And that was to hedge against the banks. Right? That was like, this is my currency if everything goes down. And that was what I was putting most of my faith in. Then I took $1,000 and I put it in a CD in a bank. Yeah. Thinking like that was to hedge against myself because I didn't trust myself and my own opinions on what was going on in the world. I knew I was pretty dramatic. And then the last $1,000 was my cushion in my pocket to take on the road because I knew I didn't know how to live without money. So I needed some to survive.
Right.
And use that as the cushion to get to the place where I could live without money. And that was gone within about 3 months. And I remember this was what I learned to trust that the money would show up. And that seemed reliable.
That's a big deal to you.
It was huge. Yeah. I mean, I still live by this, is that I think if you're following your gut and you're doing if you're following following your intuition and you're doing what you think is right, well, let's go with you're just following your intuition, right? If you're following your intuition and you're making your efforts to protect yourself, to secure yourself, then I believe that you're continued to be provided for. But I think that's a difficult spot to get to. Like, because remember, my ultimate goal was, I feel like if I had enough faith in the idea that I would be fine without needing a backpack even, and could just walk out the door. Yeah. I'm convinced there is a way I could get to that space. I just never got to that honest belief. So if I tried that now without that belief, I'm going to end up freezing to death. Right. Same thing with money. If I try living without money right now, without that faith, and that faith comes and goes, right? So I think if I could get to a place where I honestly am 100% convinced that, or believe that I'm going to be fine, I think I would be. But I think I need to be in that space.
You're not talking about self-belief here. In other words, you're not talking about the belief that you're going to be able to figure out a way to serve. Maybe this is a distinction that I'm overplaying and overemphasizing just to make sure that people understand what I'm talking or what you're talking about. But you're not talking about the idea that you're going to be able to survive and believing in yourself. You're talking about believing that something, believing in some benevolent force, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is if you have faith in the universe or God, however you want, whatever vernacular you want to use, that the universe or God will provide for you, but you have got to believe in it wholeheartedly for that to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, I call it the universe. Just makes more sense to me.
Fair enough.
No, and that's how I would translate to people who were, super Christian missionaries who would pick me up and try and save me. Yeah. At first, I was really annoyed by them. I didn't like them.
They're all
I find
over,
them
aren't they?
aggressive.
They're all over the place, too.
Yeah. But then I learned, like, the people who actually had faith in what they were saying, rather than just, like, regurgitating what they were what they were talking about in a book, or what they were talking about in church, or their interpretation of the Bible or whatever. If they actually had a belief that they had an experience with that they could base it in, then I could have that conversation with them, and I'll say God, I'll say Jesus, I'll say whatever, just to continue that conversation and say, like, for me, it's easily translatable, that trip of saying, like, yeah, I'm following God's word or whatever, Yeah. To me, that sounds ridiculous, but but it's essentially exactly what I'm talking about. I'm following my intuition.
Yeah, if you're being guided in a direction, you're following God's plan.
Yeah, it's an inner guidance.
Yeah, I told these folks in Randleman, and maybe I'll tell this story before this episode's out because it's the second time it's come up, but I ran into a group of fundamentalist Christians, bikers, basically. It was a great scenario. It was such a great time. But the guy picked me up. He's like, "You hungry?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hungry." I was hungry, and I'd learned by that point, it was August of the first year, follow it. Right. Usually these things...
It's always an invite.
Yes, it turns out really well one way or another.
Generally,
Generally. And I jumped in and went to this church gathering, and he didn't really care that I was hungry. He thought he had found a stray sheep to bring into the flock. He was going to save me. And he's like, "So how long you been out?" And I'm like, "What? Oh, I don't know, a month or two." "You been homeless a month or two?" And I'm like, "Not homeless." "What?" "Well, no, I'm out doing this because I like it. I'm trying to figure, learn some things." It pissed him off. Right. That I was not homeless because
you're not destitute.
Exactly, I was not in that desperate mindset where I guess I was malleable, psychologically malleable, where he could save me, and it pissed him off. He should have been happy that I wasn't homeless, right? And I think he was pissed off that he asked me if I was hungry.
He lost his spiritual sales commission.
Exactly, and I got some free burgers and hot dogs.
There you go.
Deal. But anyway, later on in the night, we're off in some other place. I met another guy, and we had a really fantastic conversation. This Will guy, I don't know if you remember him or not, but we were sitting at this church, and I decided to sit through the sermon. The pastor, I forgot his name. I named him Snake, so Pastor Snake was giving, and we were having a conversation about it. Basically, the crux of it was that we were on the same team at that point, because I was in much the same space at that point that you were. And then I divined, God and the universe to me, and I still see this, is a direct parallel. They are one and the same thing. Yeah. That karma is, the heavenly reward. That if you behave and you do the right things, you're going to be paid back either with karma or the idea of you're going to go to heaven. It's the same thing. Behave, good things happen to you. The cosmic Santa will bless you at Christmas time, however you want to look at it. And I still see that. I don't know that what I believe as far as that goes anymore. We've had you and I have had a lot of conversations about that. And I don't know because I've seen things. I can't discount and out of hand just everything at this point because of I can look at the day that Andre and I crossed paths, and there are certain times where if you look at the course of a day or the course of a week or even 10 years, you can see certain courses and certain points in time that had they not been perfectly timed and gone exactly how they did, your life is completely different and lesser for it. And that's the thing. That's where I don't necessarily I don't fall into the same, I guess, theological camp or philosophical camp as far as this goes, however you want to.
Whichever. Yeah.
I don't fall completely in there yet, but I'm not going to sit here and say that's great. I can't do it. And I don't know where I'm at anymore with that. It depends sometimes on the day. Because we perfect example, December. We're sitting down in Peru and teeth thing are coming up, and I kept saying, throughout the course of December, I think you were saying the same. It feels like everything is bottlenecking.
Right.
At the first of the year, like something's coming, something's happening. I don't know what the fuck it is. I got no idea. And then, yeah, January 2nd rolls around.
Right. And the world explodes.
Oh my God, for both of us, really. I
Yep.
mean, it was like perfectly timed right there. New Year's came. We got drunk New Year's Eve and got New Year's Day off, I guess, like,
It's a holiday.
yeah, a celestial holiday. And boom, the second came around, and it has not. It's starting to slow. I think it's starting to kind of sort itself out for us, at least. But it's not really.
Yeah.
But how do you explain that? I mean, how do you get this sense beforehand throughout? We're floating down the Amazon River, and it's like, this is great, but damn, something feels like it's.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I don't either. None of this shit I could predict.
no, I think that's like, now I sound like a big hippie, but it's that energy flow thing is what I think it is.
Yeah.
I think that's a real thing. And I think that when you're more relaxed, like floating down the Amazon, I think you feel it easier. And when you're more stressed and worried about international shipping insurance, it's harder to tune into.
How's that working out for you?
Yeah, well, it's almost done, thank God.
Good.
Hopefully. I don't know. I mean, that's non-explanation. That's a theory.
Yeah, right.
It's my hypothesis.
Yeah, it's the best thing that I can say, the most authentic answer I can ever give to that question is, what do you believe, Todd? I'm not an atheist. I don't like being called an atheist. It pisses me off when people think I'm an atheist.
Right.
They're misconstruing the bedtime story and this childish idea of Sky Daddy and a zombie messiah
Right.
as atheism. I think it's a bedtime story. I think it's a mythology.
Right.
And to believe mythology literally is like believing that Thor is literally in the sky throwing lightning bolts at you.
Well, and that's why I prefer saying like the universe over God, but
Right.
I'm fine saying God.
Yeah.
I just think when I'm using different terminology, then I'm saying something different.
Yeah.
Like how it's being received is very different
Right.
because for me, if I say God, it sounds very personified and sounds like, the Sky Daddy thing of this,
Right.
like it's a force that's outside, it's intelligent, independent from us, and it's benevolent or punishing or whatever. And that's not what I believe at all.
Yeah.
Me
neither.
I mean, my version of karma that I believe is not punishing or rewarding. It's a learning. I feel like it's if you take it outside of physically being here, I think on a spiritual level, and on that spiritual level, who gives a shit if you get hurt or what? It's if you learn the right tools from it and you can move past. If you're dying of cancer, if you're born with, I don't know, in a coma,
Well, you take
whatever.
To be clear, though, you take, I think, a different view of what karma is than I think most people would think of when they hear the word.
Yeah, and that's why I don't like talking about karma so much either, because there's a preconceived notion about that.
And when
for me, karma is like a force,
Right.
like gravity.
When I'm comparing it to the heavenly reward, I think I'm thinking of the traditional thing, like if you do good things, that good things come back to you. And if you think good thoughts, good things, your karma's going to come and get you if you do that.
Yeah, and I
Karma's
feel
a
like
bitch.
that's religion.
It is.
And that's my
It's the heavenly
difference
reward.
between religion and
Yeah.
spirituality.
Yeah, yeah. I just to finish what I was going to say. I think the most authentic thing I can say is almost heresy in 2018. I don't know. I do not.
In the age of information.
In the age of fucking camps and mobs and everything else, it's almost heresy to say I don't know, and I really don't. I think there's more to it than I can understand. There's more to. I'm not nearly smart enough. I don't think
Well,
to
I'm
be
definitely not saying
Yeah.
I understand.
No. I'm not saying you are. I just
Yeah.
I think I'm okay acknowledging that I'm not an atheist. I think there is something going. I don't know if it's a collective consciousness, if we're part of a massive organism we just can't perceive something.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Right.
I used to kind of fall into that atheist belief system and just anti-theist. And I talked about this in another episode. I used to ravage religion. I used to drop napalm on Facebook villages when I would talk about religion and things. Got known for that. People liked it. Atheists did anyway.
Of course, you got like
And my tribe.
atheism is the most predominant religion these days, I'd say.
It's an ism. It's a mob. it's a group. It's a tribe, right?
Well, it's cool to be atheist.
Yeah. And I would do that, and I've come to terms with it because I don't think I think that it's an operating system, religion. It puts things into simple terms, simple enough terms where your mind can function properly without having to be bound up with the fear and the anxiety that we all fear surrounding death and surrounding purpose and surrounding why we're here, what we're supposed to do with this infantile consciousness and the sense of self. Religion takes care of all of that for a lot of people. I have no problem with that at all. As long, as I said in the other cast, as long as you stay in your lane. You know, you start telling me it's
as long as they don't have a problem with you not having a problem with it. Yeah,
exactly. You know, have your personal relationship with God or the universe or
whatever.
A fucking blow up doll. I do not care.
Right.
But keep it personal and let other people sort of do their own thing. And that's where I think it's a good line of distinction. You start using that as a club and start trying to force people to believe what you believe because it reinforces your beliefs and your place at the center of the universe. Then I think we move into problems. But other than that,
yeah. But I think a lot of people take their like religions and their beliefs into like kind of like the constitution of that belief has to do with aggressively overrunning other people's, like the proselytizers and the evangelicals.
Well, yeah, they have to go save people.
Right, and that becomes part of the belief. So then it becomes an infringement on your belief to stop them from overrunning other people. And that's where it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, you don't get it. No, you get it. I'm just like, leave people the fuck alone. Take that crusading out of the scripture. And if it's there, cut it out of the fucking Bible.
Or the other versions where you got like the cults where they're gonna go drink Kool-Aid on a.
That's Darwinism to me. I'm all right with that.
Right. Yeah.
I really am. I mean, I'm not advocating for Jim Jones. I don't think that the next Jim Jones should be springing up anytime soon. But there were children involved there, and that's fucked up.
And people get raised in these things, and people get convinced of these things.
Westboro, I guess, is the same. You've seen those children at Westboro Baptist Church. They go out and protest soldier funerals.
Yeah.
And there's little kids holding signs that say "God hates fags." They're being indoctrinated into this shit, and that's a problem. And I guess you could apply that to. I don't know. I think we're getting off on a.
But I mean, then you get into people's beliefs and how they raise their kids, and
it's Sunday school or indoctrination.
Yeah,
I don't know that we want to go. Let's go back to the traveling stuff. That was fun. So anyway, we were talking. Last thing I knew, you were in Tennessee. Let's go back to the walk a little bit. You're in Tennessee, and you took a route through Tennessee. I guess Arkansas, Missouri is next. Where'd you go?
After Tennessee, I went through Kentucky.
I
nipped the tip of Kentucky and Illinois.
That sounds kinky.
I know, yeah. Paducah. I went through there. I went through. Did I go through Carbondale? I can't remember if I did or not. Yeah, I went through some place that had Metropolis. That had a big Superman.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
It's an actual town called Metropolis in Illinois.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, they claim it as the hometown of Superman. Yeah, even though he's from Kansas, and the Metropolis was clearly New York. But I don't know. They've got a town called Metropolis in Illinois that I apparently had high hopes to become one.
Yeah.
And they've got a full color 10-foot statue of Superman. I think it's 10 feet, something like that.
You have a picture of that?
Of course.
Sweet.
Yeah. And his domestic partner, Big John, who
domestic partner.
There was another large 10 feet color statue of him carrying home the groceries. It's great.
Really?
Yeah, I've got pictures of both of them.
I'd love to see. I've never seen those.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So from there, you're in Illinois, and then you cross, I guess, the Mississippi at that point, right?
Into Cape Girardeau. Yeah.
On the Boot Hill.
Yeah.
It's way south.
Yeah.
How'd you get across the river?
Oh, man, I wanted to walk the bridge, but after my experience trying to walk the bridge in Paducah, which was this old, 1930s kind of Depression-era bridge, where I made it 3/4 of the way across, but it was a very narrow bridge, and I was disrupting traffic, and the last quarter I had to be driven across by a cop car.
Was he friendly at least?
He was super friendly.
Yeah.
Cool. It was like one of those bridges that had the graded bottoms on it.
Yeah.
And so he's IDing me, and I'm like,
I can't drop this.
Yeah, I don't want to drop my license or my wallet.
Yeah, right.
So he put me in the
In the cruiser.
And got me to the other side.
That was nice.
Handed me over to the Illinois police. Oh, yeah, because that was going Kentucky to Illinois.
Right. Paducah
So,
Bridge,
so then looking at the Mississippi, I mean, that's
Mile
Cape
wide,
Girardeau. It's pretty wide by that time. And so I just stood in front of the bridge and hitched across.
Oh, sweet.
I had the guy pick me up the guy who picked me up, I was right in front of where the bridge starts.
Yeah.
And he dropped me off right on the other side.
Then across Missouri, how long did that take you?
Oh, God, when did I get through there?
Well, instead of asking,
I don't know, like 20 days, month.
yeah.
How
So you're about a
It
third
took
of the way
me-
across now. So your mileage is starting to creep up every day.
Well, after Ingrid left, so it took us 2 months to get through Georgia.
Right.
She left, went home, and then it took me 3 months to get from Sewanee to Denver,
3 months from Sewanee,
Tennessee
to
Denver.
And 2 months in Georgia, 3 months for the rest to get to Denver.
And then to get from Denver to Seattle the next year was 2 months.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's the same distance.
From Savannah to Denver and Denver to Seattle.
Yeah. So I was ready to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in the beginning, like I said, I was doing 8 to 10 miles. And then she went home. I was averaging around 15, and then it got up to 20. By the time I got into Kansas, I was around like 21 a day. And then by the time I got into Denver, I was doing about 26 a day.
Well, you had to be at that point, though, because when you get into Kansas, at least Western Kansas, if I'm remembering
Kansas
correctly.
was great.
Yeah, but those towns are not, I mean, you're out east, they're close together. You're going through a town every 5 miles or so, maybe 10 miles.
In Kansas?
No, out east.
Oh, yeah.
But when you get out west, especially I
Can-
think on the other side of the river, I mean, these towns start to spread the fuck out.
Well, in Kansas, I was hitting one town a day.
Yeah. I mean, so
They're 26 miles apart because each town, they're specifically 26 miles apart because each town was a train dump.
oh, really?
Yeah, so it was like each town, I think that was like how far they could get before they need to refuel the
And you
water
took
tank or something like that.
US 36, right?
36.
Yeah. Is that specific to
That-
36, or is that like throughout the state of Kansas?
Oh, I don't know. That's probably specific to 36 because it parallels the old rail lines, but they probably just used that format.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if every other town is exactly 26 miles apart, but
Yeah.
but along 36, that's what it was.
So if you were doing only 10 miles a day,
It was actually the old Pony Express route as well.
36?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, I went into the museum.
So 26 miles, that's about the distance of a horse a day, isn't it?
Yeah,
well?
that's probably another reason why they're 26.
I'll bet you that's
Because
it.
there's Pony Express also. But I remember each town was like a major town.
Yeah, back in the day anyway.
Way
Yeah.
back. Yeah, they were like, that was fascinating to me because it was like, there were towns I was going through that were 200-300 people maybe.
Yeah,
That used to be 40,000-50,000 when that was a major city.
yeah,
And that was because they were train towns.
yeah.
There were train stops. And then that changed in the 40s when we decided to switch to the highway system and made interstates. So the interstates came around the 50s. Everything shifted down to where 70 went through, and those towns just died.
Yeah,
So it became really fascinating to me to see like the travel of population.
like Route 66 when 40 and 44 sprung up. That's another conversation. I love Route 66.
Yeah.
I won't bother with that. So you went through. You caught the Pony. I heard you say you caught the Pony Express Museum. Where was that?
Marysville, I want to say.
Kansas.
Yeah.
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 That'd be fascinating. I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little thing, but it was cool.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. I love that history out there.
Yeah,
One of
yeah.
the things I loved about living out west
Yeah.
was that old frontier pioneer stuff. Yeah, it was. I didn't.
Yeah, they had the old like the posters for recruiting Pony Express guys, and like specifically looking for orphans.
Yeah.
Death rate was pretty high.
Pretty real high.
Yeah.
It wasn't a small
Wild
thing.
Bill Hickok, I think, was he was a Pony Express guy when he was like 16 or something.
Young and stupid.
Yeah, I think he's the only one of the few who made it like a year and a half before it ended. It was only around like a year and a half.
And he gets shot in the back in Deadwood.
Yeah.
So you were at least doing a town a day. So you were doing at least 26 miles through Kansas. So your endurance and your physical ability was a pretty essential point by then, because how much water would you have to carry if you're doing 10 miles a day and you're in between towns and you're not able to really.
I think I was carrying like 6 to 8 liters.
And average Camelback is 3, right? And you had the
Well, I had that 10
drop
liter
it.
one that I'd fill. Well, no, I think I put 4 in there. I'd have 4 liters in me, so basically a gallon of water.
And that got you through 26 miles?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't drink much water.
I'd have
So it
to
was
carry
like-
twice that, I think.
It's like my
Especially-
lips were all cracked and shit.
Yeah.
I didn't have a hat. August in Kansas, flat roads. I mean, it was dumb. But, I mean, if you're walking across the country, why would you aim for Kansas in August, the heart of tornado season? Unfortunately, I never saw one.
True, yeah.
Well, I saw 2 in Georgia, but I never saw one in
saw
Kansas.
2 tornadoes in Georgia.
Yeah,
What
same
month-
day.
What month did you start? I don't think I asked you that.
St. Patrick's Day,
So
March 17th.
Yeah, down south.
Well, we
tornadoes
started
March.
walking on the 20th, but we got there on the 17th.
Yeah. Northern Kansas, 36, then you're into Colorado. You're into starting to kind of approach the foothills of the Rocky Mountains and all that after a little while. And pretty much the same as Kansas, right? In eastern Colorado?
Exactly the
Yeah.
same.
And then, so you get into Denver and you basically hunker down into winter quarters over the winter of 03 to 04,
Yep.
right? You got a job, you just basically did your thing until the next spring.
Right.
And when did you leave Denver at that point?
Twice I left Denver. So I had a girlfriend then who went with me out of Denver, Angie, and we left May something 2nd, I think, out of Denver, walked up straight north up to Laramie, but about 8 miles south of the Wyoming border, we broke up on the side of the road. It was about 2 days. Horrible breakup.
Yeah.
And then she hitched home. I kept walking. This is an interesting story. So I made it. She left, and then I kept going. That night, I made it to a little place called Tie Siding, which is a fireworks store. That's it. And it was open, but there were no lights on. It was just a parking lot. There's a little trailer in the parking lot. I was thirsty, and I wanted a Coke or something. And so I went into this fireworks store, and I'm looking around. There's like no lights on. You know, it definitely looks closed, fully closed. So I'm wandering around in there. There's a fridge. There's a Coke. So I was like, okay. So I grabbed a Coke. I left like $2 on the counter or something like that. Sat out in front and was just drinking it and thinking about this breakup. And I was really kind of torn up about it.
Yeah.
I felt like it was fitting into a pattern that I had of, I forget what it was at the time, but I felt like I was like redoing the same thing over and over again of running away from things. And that's how I was feeling about the walk at the time, was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just running away from this other
Escapism.
thing. I'm going off into the desert. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
right.
what's going on? So I'm sitting there sipping on this Coke, and a guy comes out of the trailer. And he's like, oh, man, I didn't see a car in the lot, so I didn't think anyone was here. And I was like, oh, well, I left $2 on the counter. So he's like, and is this guy Curtis, and he was, anyway, he invited me to dinner. So he and I get talking, and he just had a fascinating story. So both of us were going through this real, like, soul-searching kind of in-depth, like, check in on who we
Funny
are.
how you find those people.
Yeah. I mean, in the middle, literally,
Yeah.
he was literally the only guy for miles around.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and that's who he was.
Boom, there he is.
Yeah. And, probably like 20, 30 miles radius, 60-mile diameter, in any direction. Yeah. So he and I start talking, and it turns out he had died 2 weeks before I met him for a total of about 4 minutes, clinically dead on the operating table. And he told me this story. So, of course, that spawns a lot of soul searching. But he went into the story of he had won the lottery when he was like 21 or 23 or something like that. Won, I don't know, a few $1 million. He said he was so happy when that money was gone. It took him 3 years to blow through it, because he was just partying. He told me he bought like $150,000 samurai sword with like rice paper worked into the hilt with a message on it or something, and like all this other shit. Anyways, yeah. So he said he was so happy when that money was gone because he couldn't tell who his friends were.
Yeah.
You know, he had no idea who was genuinely there for him and who, and he was, you know, a shit show. He's off getting drunk, partying. He didn't have to work. He's, you know, fucking everybody who comes around.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, the money's gone, and he was giving out money left and right, hand over fist.
Yeah.
Just anybody needed money. Yeah, here, take $40,000, take $50,000. Don't worry about it.
I didn't work for it.
Yeah, exactly. Then when it was gone, no one would talk to him.
Yeah.
Because everyone thought that he'd want that money back. He lost his whole family. None of them would talk to him. He didn't have any real friends anymore.
Yeah.
So he's just isolated on his own.
Yeah.
He told me he went to his grandmother's funeral, and even there, no one in his family would talk to him. He even would like pull cousins aside and be like, "Hey, look, I don't care about that money. I'm not looking for it. It was a gift. It was never a loan." And, you know, I said it at the time. I mean it now. And they were still like, "Yeah, no, it's fine." And I wouldn't talk to him. Anyways, it went on years like this. And then one day, this lady knocks on the door with a 14-year-old kid. And it turns out he's the father of the kid. And she was one of the girls that was in the party time and got knocked up and had no interest in this shit show as a father and just kept it to herself. Easy to disappear when you're one of a million. And
Yeah, right.
you know, and just raised the kid. But now the kid was curious about who his father was, you know, wanted that whole exploration. And so she hunted him down, found him, and they got along great. He was ecstatic. Suddenly he had a family.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
He got along great with the girl.
Wow.
So
That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, but they started dating again, and forming a bit of a family, you know? They dated for like a year or so. And then one day she was driving back to her house. I don't know, she lived like an hour away or something like that. And on her way home with the son in the car, they got plowed by a Mack truck. Both of them instantly killed. And so that had spun him into a deep, deep depression because all of a sudden you get family after so many years of not
taken
having it.
away.
And then it's just, you know.
Yeah.
So he coped with his depression by eating, gorged himself for about a year. And that, I guess, was the year before I met him because it got to a point where he had a coronary and ended up having a heart attack and going into the hospital and dying on the table several times until they resuscitated him and brought him back. And by the time I met him, he was alive and reflecting on his life and $40,000 in debt, thanks to the lottery.
What was he doing before he hit the lottery?
I have no idea.
He didn't tell you.
No, I didn't ask. Yeah.
But his it was a curse.
Yeah.
That money.
And he described it in that way. Yeah.
Wow.
It's free money.
And just some random guy. The one thing, and I know nobody else listening to this unless they've been out hitchhiking for extended periods of time, understand where I'm coming from here.
Right.
But it's those random little moments. I mean, it's you learn a lot. You get a chance to learn from someone else's experience. And, you know, this interaction. I think we were talking about on the other podcast yesterday that, you know, this human interaction between people, exchanging information, exchanging experiences, perspectives, things like that. And you find a guy who, like you described, is maybe the only guy in a 50-mile radius, and you run into him because you are out there.
Right. And going through something that I'm like pioneering my soul as well,
Yeah.
you know? And I was telling him all about the breakup and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And what all it meant to me and this cyclical pattern that I'm seeing in myself. And we're having this big, like, back and forth.
Yeah.
And we talked until, like, I know the sun was up when well, that doesn't mean much. It's Wyoming and it was July, or June or something. But still, you know, I mean, we must have got there at like 5. We were up till at least midnight or 1, just talking away.
It reminds me of Andre, just a little bit. I mean, the scenarios, but the money factor, you know, Andre was terminal at that point. But this guy had just died on the table. I mean, that'll fuck you up. That will bring you crashing down to reality and make you look at things. And Andre was, you know, he was in his last 5 years of his life, and he was basically there as well.
Right.
And how money can affect you and what it does to you. Now, this was in the spring then of 04, right?
It would have been May because, that was when I left. I went back on the trail June 5th.
Okay.
So actually after that conversation, I guess to wrap that story up, he and I had talked about the whole Angie thing and breaking up and all of that. And I decided that she was an important person in my life, that I had found that person that I was looking for, and to go off and continue this walk cross country, it didn't make any sense. To just like continue something solely because I started it, even though I'm leaving what I actually am after behind.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like just because the goal that I had said, it goes back to that light at the end of the tunnel. You need to be willing to let that change. So I got on a bus and I went back to Denver, went back and had a talk with her, and we ended up getting back together. But then this was interesting. So for the next 3 weeks that I was there, so we got back together, I got my own apartment, I got a job, I burned through, to get that apartment, I spent most of the money that I had saved to finish the walk over the winter, you know, putting down deposit and stuff like that. Every night I was having dreams about being on the walk, you know,
Yeah.
And I started getting emails from people.
Why'd you stop?
Yeah, I mean, I only got one hate mail one, which was from this guy down in Georgia that I met.
Talked about that several times.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, I'm not even going to address that. But a lot of people were supportive.
You had a blog before there were even blogs. I don't think there were blogs.
There were blogs then.
Was it a thing in the culture though? Was it actually?
Yeah, it
called
wasn't
a
like it
blog?
is now. It was called a blog as of like late 90s, because I remember
was it?
when I was in college, 99, 2000, something like that. I remember someone saying they had a blog, and I just thought that word was ridiculous.
No, yeah, 15 years
It was
ago.
like zine, you know.
Yeah,
It was like,
maybe that's what it was. So you had a blog, you had a website, and
Yeah.
you were basically some pretty in-depth posts. And this is where I was going to go with it next, because this is the point when you were having this breakup with Angie. I found your website after doing the stream of consciousness stuff, and had this idea. I'd do a Google search and figure out if anybody had done anything like this thing that I had in my head.
Right.
And that's how I found you. Was that for whatever reason your shit popped up? Hey, let's read this. Click. And I spent. It was good, and I thought the writing was very, very well done. Not just because of the writing, but you talked about that breakup, and you were brutally fucking honest.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some, oh, well, and life goes on, and I suppose this was meant to happen, and blah, 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 smack upside the head. This was, you were brutalizing.
yeah.
I think yourself, if I remember right. I mean, you were
Yeah.
really disappointed and frustrated with yourself, and that's what got me, was that you were sharing, I mean, some real authentic emotion.
Yeah.
Some raw.
Yeah, I felt like I had hit a turning point, like a changing point in my life, because I felt like, again, I feel like there's this pattern, and this is kind of what I'm going through now. I've always equated my relationships with women to my relationships with cities or residences, right? There's this same mentality that I have of like, I'm enamored with where I live or who I'm dating when I first start dating them, and then I get used to the place, and then some other place looks great, you know? And then I move.
Right.
Either away from the relationship to go back to being single, or, I mean, I've never cheated on anybody, but so it wasn't like I was looking at somebody else saying like, oh, this looks great over here. With women, it was more like, oh, this, and this is not going to last 50 years from now. So why bother putting in the effort? And I'm just going to drop it now. And I would see that in a city. You know, if I'm living in Denver or New York or wherever, I'd be like, well, this is great for right now while I'm 23 or 24 or 30, you know, but when I'm 50, I'm not going to want this. So I want to be someplace where I've lived for 20 years by the time I'm 50. So I might as well move now and get to that place. You know, this is the logic.
Yeah.
And so, with Angie, I was like seeing where the argument was and didn't really hold water altogether. And so I felt like it just burst into an emotional overload. And so we just split ways, and that coming back together, we could get through that as you do in relationships, push through and stay together and, you know, have that longevity that I never really believed in and still struggle with. But yeah, I mean, that was part of that return, was like, oh, now I found stability. Now I found my community. Now I found my place to be, was with her. 3 weeks later, after I got back, we broke up, you know, and the next day I went back to Laramie and I finished up the walk. I felt like that was the right place to be.
Right.
then. Whereas had I continued that back in May when we first broke up, I would have been regretting that the whole way. So a lot of people look at it like, oh, if you could do it over, would you have not gone back? Or, no, that was part of the walk.
Part of the whole tapestry of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, if I hadn't returned and taken care of things and at least put it to bed in a way that I understood, I'd be regretting it still today, saying like, oh, well, I had this one relationship, but I felt like I really needed to finish my walk. And I think that's also largely why I was done with it and just kind of powered through. I was doing, I think, like 28, 29 miles a day up to like 31 to 32 miles a day.
Yeah, I want to get into Wyoming, and I think obviously you went through part of Montana, right? No, you missed
Yeah,
Montana.
but let me just wrap this up real quick because this is kind of where I'm at now with places. So coming back here to Massachusetts it's sort of the same feeling as that time back in 2004.
That point in with Angie? And going back to Denver? Okay.
I'm seeing an opportunity to come and root into a place where I can belong.
Right.
Right. And I've seen this a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I'm hoping is to be able to learn how to stay in one place and become a part of a community or learn whatever that is in me that keeps me moving to address it because it seems unhealthy in a sense.
How much of that do you think, I don't want to go too far down this road, maybe 5 words. How much do you think age has to do with that?
I don't know. I mean, like, if you only want
kidding.
5 words,
Nah.
No, I mean, how much does age have to do with it?
Yeah.
From my perspective,
You're in your mid-20s at this point, right? Back doing the walk, you're mid to late 20s.
Late. Yeah, I was
like
28.
28.
I was 28.
And now
then.
you're 41. I mean, there's a big difference.
Yeah, but I live kind of the same.
I'm just asking. I
Yeah,
don't want to project this.
And
on
I don't know. I don't know if it's age or not. It doesn't feel like it. Everyone that I know in Amherst, they all like kind of roll their eyes when I mention that I'm in my 40s, and they're like, "You're not."
Yeah.
This whole thing, and I think that's a lot their perspective, but for me, I recognize what you're talking about with like the midlife crisis thing.
No. I don't mean as a midlife. I mean like physical energy. Like,
that is part of it, and experience is part of it. I'm not craving to go around the world anymore. Yeah, I don't have this desire to go see everything anymore. I'm interested. I still like travel. I still like going places, but I'm not interested in lifestyle traveling anymore like I was then. I still enjoy it, but I very much recognize that it's in the past.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what I told you when I came back from Peru just now, going through Seattle, Denver, New York. My old homes.
Yeah.
It felt really good to be in each one of them, and it felt very much like they were closed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
Like that's okay. This is great to be here, and that's behind you now.
That's how I felt the last 2 weeks in Juarez, down in Peru, when I was in the hostel. Sitting in this room, I'm like, I don't think I need to do this anymore.
Right.
I do not need. I want to go to Ushuaia still. I still want to get the pictures of the penguins fucking. If penguins fuck, I'm not sure they do.
I think so.
I want to get a picture of 2 penguins fucking on my wall. But other than that, that was the bait to get there this time.
Right.
But I still want to do that, and I still I have this opportunity that I think we talked about on the last podcast of going down to the Amazon and taking and photographing Bill's stuff.
I still want to do the Trans-Siberian Rail.
Yeah, targeted stuff though. It's not like going out. I know what's out there now.
Right.
I've been all the way through Mexico, Central America, parts of South America. I've done 6 trips down there. I've traveled around hitchhiked around I know what's out there. I don't need to go explore anymore. I've got a pretty good idea, what's happening now. And I don't feel like I need to do that like I did 5 or 6 years ago. And I part of me wonders how much of it is experience and actually gaining perspective and knowledge, filling that void of curiosity that may have been there 10 years ago? Mm-hmm. And how much of it is...
Curiosity of what? Specific places that are scattered all over the place? Or what kind of curiosity?
Whatever it is that pushes you out the door. People that go wandering around and are restless, in my experience anyway, have an insane, insatiable amount of curiosity about what's out there, the possibilities,
Right, but I mean, what's pushing you outside the door? The curiosity of what's outside the door, or what's inside the door?
What?
What's inside? What you're leaving? Is that what's pushing you out there? You know what I mean? I feel
know.
like
It's different for everybody, I think.
Yeah, but I feel like I see. I mean, I met a lot of travelers at the hostel in particular, but also just moving around like you and I have. Yeah, we've met a bunch. I feel like most of the people, when you really look down into them, myself included, and maybe it's because I'm projecting this out of myself, I feel like the real motivator isn't really the curiosity of what's out there. It's just you want to kind of move away from
what's in. You're running away rather than running to.
Yeah, and again, I totally recognize that could be projection because I'm in the space of like I'm ready to face it and I'm ready to sit down.
Now, for me, I can only speak from my own experience. I do recognize what you're saying, though. I think that's perfectly valid for a lot of people. For me, I was never running out of my door. And that was a problem my girlfriend and I had in 2008, was she could not understand. God bless her for sticking through this. By the way.
Yeah.
I don't think I've addressed, I'm serious. I don't think I've addressed that enough.
Right.
The bullshit. She met me when I was doing radio and I had a career.
Yeah. It's very different now.
Making good money.
Yeah.
A little fame. And she went through that transition with me. But one of the problems that she had in 2008 when I finally did get out the door was she thought it was her. She was like, you don't.
No, well, how could you not, though?
Well, I didn't. It was my fault because I didn't really articulate. I don't know that I even articulated it to myself.
Probably not.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But if I did, I mean, I could dig through my notebooks, the writing and stuff that I was doing then. It had nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
I was a little annoyed, admittedly, that I was with somebody that didn't want to do this shit.
Right.
But it turned out to be a nice yin and yang, a nice balance of people, that were in this relationship. I mean, we've been together 15 years. Obviously, something. Do we seem miserable?
No. Yeah.
You've been here living, you've been staying here for 3 days.
No, and every time I've stayed. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's nice, but she didn't understand that I was not running from her.
Right.
I may have been running from something.
Right.
But it wasn't her.
No,
and it wasn't the house.
Yeah.
And it was. I think it definitely.
I think
was
it's
towards
internal
something.
generally.
I think I was running towards something as well. I don't know.
Well, I do
I'd have
too.
To sit
I mean,
and
when
spend 15 minutes to probably write out what that was.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's a fair thing. I mean, I felt really good when I left Denver. That was one of the best departures that I had, and it really informed me on an appropriate way for me to leave places. Was that I was really sad to be leaving Denver behind because I really enjoyed it there.
Yeah.
But I was really excited to be where I was going. Whereas every other time beforehand, when I moved, it was, leaving a city, especially, it was slamming the door behind me because I couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah.
And excited to be going where I'm going, but more that I was slamming the door behind me.
So that's what she's doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, when that happened in 2009 and left to go hitching, I made it a mental note that I keep referring back to. That was like, this is how I want to leave places when I'm leaving places. Yeah. And so it's an interesting one when you look at how I'm leaving the Hoff. I'm leaving Peru where I wanted to get out of there.
Yeah. I can attest for that.
Yeah. But I was sad to be leaving the Hoff behind. It wasn't like I was,
fuck this place, I'm out. No,
it
was none of that.
And I didn't, well, yeah, I mean, it kind of was, but it was more about the area. It was more about,
you put a lot of care. You could have easily blown that up if you wanted to. You could have just walked away from the Hoff. If you really just wanted to say fuck it.
Right, yeah.
You could have just left all your shit.
Right.
And just come home.
Well, and that's the point I think I'm trying to make is that the Hoff is what I was sad to leave, and the Hoff is where I lived.
Yeah.
I didn't live in Juarez. I didn't live in Yupa.
Right.
I lived in the Hoff.
Yeah.
I barely left that.
You put a lot of work into that place. You built it.
Well, yeah, and that was the region.
Yeah.
The region was limited to the property lines.
Yeah.
I didn't leave there very, very much. When I was there, I was there.
Yeah.
I was in the grounds, and I think that was what I was sad to be leaving.
Yeah.
What I was anxious to get away from was the villagers and the
Everything around
city
it, yeah.
and the like all the everything around me.
The ineptitude.
And which is an interesting thing to look at, because when you're leaving, like when I left Denver, what I was sad to be leaving wasn't my apartment. I didn't really have a particular attachment to my apartment. I was sad to be leaving that area.
Yeah, Capitol
I
Hill.
had Capitol Hill pretty much. That was where my friends were.
Yeah.
That was my network, my neighborhood. And that area in Peru was shrunk down to just the hostel.
Right. Yeah.
And so with that, I was sad to be leaving that, and was excited about what's coming up here.
Yeah. Actually, let's do this. Why don't we take a quick break?
Okay.
We seem to have a gap in the conversation, which is rare.
Yeah.
Go hit the bathroom. And by the way, we have a new sponsor on the Escaping the Cave podcast. It's Bailey's Fine Liquor.
Yeah.
Goes well with coffee. Need creamer? Try Bailey's instead. Bailey's. Creamer for coffee. That was fun.
Yeah.
You can
write Bailey's and see if
no shit. Yeah, where's
we can get a free case.
That's one thing about these marathon sessions with coffee.
We just need to do them with the pens.
Yeah, maybe a catheter. It'd be good. Incidentally, Bailey's is not really a sponsor of the show, but perhaps they should be.
I think so. I think you should send them that little commercial you did.
Yeah.
See if we can get a free case.
It'll last, maybe a month. Bailey's does make a really good creamer.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Add a little sugar.
Especially if it's Christmas.
Yeah, a little honey. We had a guy that showed up at the Hoff that kind of got me hooked on that. He's met him in Salento too, right? He broke out the Baileys in the little town in Columbia that Brian and I went to. And Chris and I revisited on this trip just before we flew down to the jungle. And yeah, he brought a big bottle.
He was having a month of it.
Yeah, Canadian guy.
Yeah, it's like December is Bailey's month.
What's his name?
Mark.
Mark, that's right. Yeah, Mark and Takaya. Decided to go out. You got like a half gallon of it or something today, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
probably
something
like
that's
that.
huge.
A liter and 3/4.
Yeah. Anyway, I think where we left off, at least as far as the walk goes, you had just crossed into Wyoming. You'd gone back to Denver for about 3 weeks and basically put the relationship you were in to bed.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I didn't know that's what I was doing, but yeah, that's how it ended up. And then I returned to the walk with far less money than I had intended.
Yeah, right.
Because I put down the deposit and
psychologically, you're ready to just get this thing over with at this point, right?
basically, yeah.
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 So you're in Wyoming now, and really, I seem to remember that there was some really interesting shit about Wyoming. Yeah, like you had
I got lost for like.
That's the thing, yeah. Because in your back, you had an external frame backpack, which is the metal frame that goes around the edge, and everything sort of dangles from this frame, and it broke on you, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was in Wyoming. I lost my camera in Wyoming. I jumped over a rattlesnake in Wyoming.
Proceed. This is great.
Well, yeah. But I got lost in the desert there for like 4 days.
Well, so let's start from the beginning. You took the bus from Denver back to Laramie.
To
where you
Laramie,
left off. Yeah. And then how did it go from there? What route did you take through there?
287 up to Medicine Bow.
That's right, because we part of my traveling in 2008 as well was that was where the Vern moment happened. It was 287.
Did you go up to Medicine Bow?
No, no.
That's where the Virginian is.
Yeah, I was dropped off. I actually was picked up in Rifle, Colorado.
Okay.
Let's see. I thought I was going toward Utah. This guy was going north. I got a ride. All right, fuck it. Let's go to Wyoming.
Yeah.
And he dropped me off in what the hell's the name of that town?
Landers?
Rollins.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And he dropped me off, and I was like, okay, there's 287. Woo, I'm going to go north toward Yellowstone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
you don't want to hitch in Rollins.
Yeah, I did. And I took off from the TA he dropped me off at, got a KOA, and then walked out of town the next day. Didn't fill up my water.
That's not good.
No, it was terrible. And Wyoming's weird. I seem to remember.
Wait, isn't 287 going up out of there up to? I thought there was a river running next to it. Up to Yellowstone. Maybe not from Rollins.
Not at Rollins. No, there was
going up
there.
to Shoshone though. There's a river alongside the whole way.
I got nowhere near there. I had my backpack on, and I like I said, I stopped at a library, didn't fill up my water, figured, fuck it, I'll get a ride. And Wyoming's weird.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, because hitchhiking's illegal in Wyoming.
Well, most states, yeah.
No, not most states, but at least in Wyoming it is. My experience, no.
California,
It's
Wyoming.
not illegal in California.
Yeah, it is.
No, it's not. You can't hitchhike the freeways. Anything designated a freeway, you can't hitchhike, and technically you can't.
I thought state roads you couldn't either.
No, you can. Yeah, the only place you cannot hitchhike in California is a freeway, and you can't sit on the on-ramps. It's illegal to sit on an on-ramp.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. But Wyoming it is. And Wyomans are a little weird. They like to be left alone, and they leave people alone. And
There's 400,000 people in a state the size of Colorado.
Yeah. And I was at the point, I was really early in the hitchhiking. It was my first month. And I was still really shy about throwing my thumb out. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So I would just sit there and assume people knew that since I was sitting on a backpack by the side of the road, that I was hitchhiking. No, they didn't. And you know what? No, they're not going to stop.
Well, in Wyoming, that's for the best, though, because, you will get picked up if you throw your thumb out.
Yeah, well, I didn't figure that out.
Yeah, in Rawlings, you can get tossed in jail.
Yeah.
I was warned heavily when I went
Yeah,
through it. It was either Rawlins or it was Casper. I can't remember which one, but one of them, it was like, I got dropped off there.
Yeah.
And I was told by everyone I ran into, they're like, "Are you hitching?" I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Don't throw your thumb out."
Yeah, right. Well, no, it's the same in Nevada. Or Nevada, however you want to say it. They have the stupidest hitchhiking law there. It's illegal to put your thumb in the air.
Right.
That's the illegal act.
It's
right?
it's the not proposition,
solicitation.
Solicitation, yeah.
But you can, and I got this straight from a Nevada highway patrolman, you can hold a sign.
Really?
Yeah. It's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. So you can sit
doesn't make any
down on
sense.
an on-ramp. I did it on I-5, or not I-5, whatever the road is that goes from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. And just sit down on the backpack and have a sign set up, work like a charm. You just cannot put your thumb in the air.
That's weird.
It's stupid.
You know what I was told in Wyoming when I got a ride out of Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And the guy's driving me along. We're going along great, and then in the middle of the road, like going down the Shoshone, right, on 287. Yeah. And we drove for maybe an hour or so, and there's nothing there.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing there.
Not even trees.
No. Yeah. It's just not even space or dirt or anything.
Yeah.
There's just a void.
Yeah.
And we're driving along, and all of a sudden, the guy realizes through GPS or something that he's going absolutely in the wrong direction. So he needs to turn around and go the other way.
Yeah.
So I get out there.
Yeah.
Nothing there.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm picturing this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay. And me with my philosophy on hitching is like, take the less traveled roads, because the few cars that travel it see a guy who's stranded in the middle of nowhere and are more likely to give you a ride.
It's legit. Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, okay, this isn't so bad. So I'm throwing my thumb out, and I'm in Wyoming, which I figured was hitching friendly. It's a cowboy country, right?
Conservative.
Yeah. And I'm clean cut. I don't look like a hippie or anything.
That helps.
Yeah, a lot, and especially in those states. Then a cop comes along and he tells me, basically, he wrote me a warning. Mm-hmm. It's one of the two warnings that I have. The other one I got the next day further down in Wyoming. But I got a warning ticket saying, like, you're not allowed to hitch.
Right.
And I said, well, can you give me a ride then? Because I'm stuck.
Right.
This is the middle of nowhere. How am I supposed to get out of here? And the guy said, well, the only way I can give you a ride is if I arrest you. And I said, okay, well, let's not go that route.
Right.
What else can I do? And he's like, well, just stand here, face traffic, and have your bag in front of you. People know what you're doing. I was like, okay. So you're telling me to hitch, but
don't hitch.
What can't I do? And he's like, well, don't throw your thumb out and don't have a sign. And I was like, okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
It's so stupid.
But that's what I did, and I got out of there.
Yeah.
I was out of there in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But it was still, it was like the state trooper who wrote me a ticket for hitching, or a warning.
Yeah.
Told me to hitch.
Yeah, well, that's what the guy in Las Vegas, the guy in Vegas was the same thing. It was just like, just make sure, please don't put your thumb in the air.
Right.
You can write a sign. Just... What is the point of this?
Yeah, I don't understand. This is the thing I struggle with. This is the kind of thing that in my return to the States, I'm like, I don't want to face bureaucracy.
Well, yeah, you remember New Jersey. We're getting way off track here, but New Jersey the next year was the same thing. We're sitting here trying to hitch, in New Jersey trying to get up toward.
Well, there the culture's not even there. I mean, they're not going to pick you up.
No.
You know? Like,
But,
no,
yeah, it's the same.
that's
idea.
like trying to hitch here.
No, that day that I was going up 287, I remember we talked on the phone because I seemed to recall that you had taken 287. And I was familiar with 287 from living in Denver and I think New Mexico. I think it goes. No, it's Texas.
Yeah,
Either way,
it goes down through there.
whatever. I knew that we were up there, and I was trying to do the same thing that you were. I was sitting on the bag and out in the middle of nowhere, running low on water, and I'm like, okay, people don't know what I'm doing. I didn't really have any knowledge of the the law or the statute or anything, so I was just sitting there out of shyness, and I didn't have my thumb, and nobody would stop. The only interaction I had with any traffic was a bunch of teenagers driving by telling me to go get a fucking job.
Right.
That was it. But I happened to be set up right next to this public land, this public use land for like dune buggies and all this other crap. I guess it was like recreation, whatever.
Right.
So it's getting dark. I need a place to sleep. Oh, hey, it's public. I think I'll walk in here and I'll meander around. First thing I see is like this old car that had been there since the Eisenhower administration. I think it was that old, but it was full of bullet holes. So people were coming out with their shotguns,
Right, yeah.
blowing the shit out of this stuff. And so anyway, whatever. What are the odds that anybody's going to show up? It's getting dark. I'm going to throw my tent up. Had a nice little fire that I started with.
Shit.
Yeah. Cow shit, I think.
Yeah.
And it does burn, thanks to, what's his name, Les Stroud from Survivor, man. I knew that I could start a fire with dry cow shit or horse shit or whatever it was. I burnt Canada out of my atlas to get everything going. What do I need Canada for, right? Anyway. And I sit there and I'm in my tent. I'm having the greatest time. Got my little fire going. I finally lay down. And a fucking car pulls into this place. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the stories earlier, because they were just bouncing around doing their little things. The sun is still kind of up at this point, so I can kind of see, and they can see down toward me, and I like pop up, and I know they see me with my big yellow rain fly
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
on this massive 2-man tent
Yeah.
out in the with no trees, nothing. I
Right.
didn't think there was any possibility of anybody be coming back here.
Right.
Well, they did. So I like tear the rain fly off of this thing, but I'm like in bug out mode here.
I would have torn the whole tent down and moved.
There was no place better to go at this point. Anywhere I go that I can walk to, unless I spend 2 hours going over the ridge into the step over here, it's not going to be any better. So I'm like, all right. And I get in my tent, and every noise for the rest of the fucking night, I've got these imaginations of this thing going in my head. Like I was thinking that they had buried their pot out there, and they had like 15 pounds of pot. They're drug runners, and they're afraid that I'm out there to fucking go steal it. So they're going to come and kill me.
Yeah.
They're going to beat me up and
I
take
totally know that one.
take my Cliff Bars out of my bag. And,
They're
you know,
totally after your Cliff Bars.
yeah, exactly. Well, hey, they fucking pack really well. They want those
And they're
Cliff
$3
Bars.
a pop.
Yeah. They're going to use me for target practice or whatever and bury me. But every noise that I heard, and we're out in the middle of fucking Wyoming, there's livestock, there's shit out there. There's wildlife out there.
There's coyotes out there.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't get much sleep that night. And but it was funny because when I sat down to write this up, it reminded me of Vern from the movie Stand By Me. He's sitting out there and they're camping out on their way to see the body, and he's sitting there with the gun.
He's got his gun, yeah.
Every time any noisy, that was me that first night. It was a seminal moment for me because it really highlighted.
That was in that first year, too, wasn't it?
It was in the first month.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, yeah.
actually it was the end of the first trip, the first 10-day little excursion that I took.
When I dropped you off at Morgan?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I started there in Morgan, and I got the ride with Dennis, the eventual cop killer guy,
Right.
to Glenwood Springs,
And then
stayed
went
there.
up.
Yeah, went to toward Rifle, and then I got the ride north to Rollins.
Right. Okay.
And so that was right at the end. Anyway, it was a seminal moment because it helped me later on remember going through that and how it's just such bullshit. They were just out there doing what the fuck ever. They saw a tent, whatever, some guy with a tent. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah. The only time I had anybody roll up on me was actually they were checking to see if I was alive.
Yeah.
And that was in Wyoming.
Oh, well, that's
That was
nice of them.
Yeah, I was outside of Casper
Yeah.
actually, or whichever town that is that I would have gotten arrested on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had camped that night. there was frost in the morning, and I'd like to sleep in that the Alpine or the Aurora, whichever one, that bivy bag.
Yeah.
And it looks like a body bag.
Yeah, it is.
And, and I was on top of some thick piece of foam that I had found on the side of the styrofoam thing for the loft.
Yeah.
But there was snow and not snow, but frost everywhere, and there was frost on the bag and everything. And so it's just this like stiff looking frozen body bag, 20, 30 feet off the side of the road.
Feet poking up at the bottom so you can see there's a person in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I woke up to a pickup truck with Wyoming plate pickup truck driving straight at me.
Holy shit.
I mean, Wyoming, they want to see something on the side of the road. They're not going to get out of the car. They're going to drive over there.
Fuck yeah, that's what they got the truck for.
Exactly, yeah. So they head right over there, and I'm like, oh shit, and I don't sleep with any clothes on, so I wasn't going to get on either. Jesus. So I hastily unzipped the thing and poked my head out. I was like, hey,
Right.
And they're like, oh shit, we just checking to see if there's a dead body in there.
Nope.
I was like,
just a naked one.
I'm okay. And they're like, all right. And then they took off, and I was like, shit, I should have asked them for a ride.
Yeah.
Instead, I got a ride with a dump truck.
That was I figured out that they call it stealth camping. And I think it was that moment that I figured out that, you need to be stealthy. You need to put a lot of effort into making sure that you're not going to be seen. Because any time after that, this was in, I guess, maybe right around June 1st of 2008. The only other time that I've ever been seen stealth camping was that Nevada trip, in 2016. And it was because I got lazy. I was camped out behind a truck stop. Like, I was far enough off. And actually, I didn't get lazy. This guy was fucking drunk, he was high. And he didn't want to walk over the overpass to go to the next gas station to get beer.
Yeah.
Right. So what was he doing? He was so fucked up. He was going to walk across the interstate, and so he was going to run across the interstate, so he wouldn't have to walk the overpass. How messed up he was. And so I see him. I'm sitting up. I think I was writing on my phone, writing a blog post or something like that. And I see this guy coming. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Right.
And I had my knife, and I was getting all puffy. I'm like, all right, God damn it! I better look big. I got to look mean. I got to, look this guy in the eye when he comes at me, And I scared him more than he scared me. He's like, "What the fuck is this? Don't you shoot me!"
Right.
That's what he said to me. All right, it's all right, dude. And he's like,
we're cool.
Yeah, and he's like really trying really hard to make sure that I know that he's not there to fuck with me, because I probably look pretty anxious at that point.
Right. Yeah.
I can imagine the look on my face. But anyway, he goes to the highway. And he thinks better of running across the interstate to go get beer at this gas, whatever the fuck he was going to get. And then he comes back the same way. Hey, I'm coming back now. Now don't you shoot me. It's just me now.
It's just me. You were old friends.
Yeah. And again, it's like, okay, this is cool. He's at least, in the moment, it's like, all right, yeah. And then, despite the Vern moment, despite everything else that's happened over the last, I guess it was 8 years at this point, he's just working me. I bet you he might just be putting me at ease so he can come back later and stake my Cliff Bars again. Something, it's just your mind.
No, I know.
To you.
If I'm ever seen, I don't think I was, though. I mean, other than the times that I just pop up way out in the open.
Yeah.
And I would do that. I only started doing that when I got on that walk when I got to Western Kansas.
Doing what?
Just camping out in the open.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The only time I would do that, I started doing that because I'd had no problems with anybody.
Yeah.
The whole way.
Right.
Everyone had been, if they weren't apathetic to me, they were super hospitable.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's
like either they just were like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Or they're like, oh, wow, that's super cool. What are you doing?
At that point, you were like throwing your tent up literally off to the side, just on the other side of the fucking,
I was
right
like
there at the
15,
side of the road.
20 feet off the side of the road.
I just can't even fathom.
Yeah. No, and I did that all the way into Denver, pretty much.
Never had any issues or anything. Huh?
Nope.
Had a couple of, didn't you have a cop stop and warn you about that or something? But it's legal because it's public right away.
Yeah, that was actually when I found out it was legal. I always thought it was illegal and just nobody cared. And so it was when Angie and I were breaking up on the side of the road. That wasn't 287 heading up to Laramie.
Yeah.
It was 8 miles south of the Wyoming border in Colorado. And we were camped out there, and that's just a really long stretch of straight highway.
Yeah.
And we were there 2 nights in the midst of our breakup. And a cop came, I think the first or second night, I can't remember which. and said, like, you know, I can't legally tell you to move this because this is public land, but you're on the most dangerous stretch of highway, and you're likely to get plowed over by a truck, and you know, I can't officially tell you to do this, but I think if you went over on the other side of that barbed wire onto that private property, which would be illegal, I think no one would bother you. So he was telling us not to do something legal, to do something illegal
For your own safety, though.
in the idea of safety. We were so pissed off at each other, we didn't move anything, but we didn't really care if a truck plowed us
Fucking, it's a good
over.
time to die anyway.
Exactly. But that was when I found out that it was legal.
Yeah, that's what I liked about the interstates, though. And a lot of times, I feel like we're going all over the place. It's all right. That's what a podcast is for. But I found that there's a difference, and I don't want to focus on this, but there's a difference between the cops out east and the cops out west.
For sure. And the cops in the middle.
Yeah. I preferred, and I still prefer, the interstates because my preferred place to camp is between the interstate and the on-ramp. There's usually... depending on the terrain and the
the clump of trees.
Yeah.
I'm always weary of those because there's always someone in there.
I've never seen anybody.
Really?
Never.
I always
And
feel like there would be.
My primary
Maybe
spot.
it's you.
It could be. Yeah, it probably is. You should say hi, and you should say, "Hey, it's me.
It's
I'm
me."
not sneaking up on you." But I ran into a cop in.
That's where we camped in I-80.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I ran into a police officer just after we hopped the train in LeGrand, Oregon. We were hitchhiking, and we were trying to figure out a place to camp. I was traveling with this guy that I'd hopped the train with, a real douchebag. But we were trying to figure this out. We had no idea where to go at this point. And the cop pulled off while we were sitting on the ramp, and he ran our ID. He was really cool about it, but he still, did the papers, please shit. And when he got done and figured out that we were not criminals, we weren't wanted anywhere, he's like, yeah, if I were you, I would camp basically between the interstate and this on-ramp, because nobody's going to come down there. And odds are, it's going to be pretty safe. That's not a place where probably cars are going to be, running off into the ditch and squashing you. If it was me, that's where I would go. Because we'd asked him questions about walking the interstate. It's legal in Oregon. Not advisable, but it's legal.
Yeah, I've done it.
Pain in the ass.
It sucks.
Dangerous
When you
as
catch a
hell.
ride, you got to run a mile to get it.
Yeah, that's why they don't stop. It's interesting that the cop story that you had in Colorado and mine, it's out east, they don't do that. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. The
I
guy,
don't think so, yeah.
every interaction that I've had, not every, but a lot of the interactions I've had with the police out east have
At
been,
least in the Northeast, yeah.
yeah, it's been pretty...
Down south, they were super helpful.
Really?
Yeah, like when we did our walk and I was scared of the Southern cops, the only kind of interaction that we had with them was really pleasant.
Yeah. Well, I told you about the Texas hitch that I did in 2013. And I'm out, I forget where, somewhere, it was in West Texas, barren area. And walking. It's hot out. Somebody called to do a welfare check on me because they thought I was overheated.
Yeah, they did that when I was in Colorado heading down to you in the beginning in 09.
Yeah. The county sheriff shows up, and she checks on me, runs my ID. But then she's like, yeah, well, we do what we call courtesy rides here. We can take you to the state line if you want. And if you know Texas, state lines, the counties,
That's
fucking huge.
Yeah.
So she throws me in her
It's
car.
like 30, 40 miles.
It was. No, it really was.
Yeah.
And she throws me in her truck, her car, whatever. I think it was a truck. And she even stopped at a little convenience store. She's like, you need anything? Yeah, just pull in here. So I go in and I fill my water up. I grab like a Gatorade and wandered around like I'm hanging out with my aunt.
Yeah.
And I walk out, stand by this fucking county, this county sheriff cruiser, waiting for her to come back out so I can hop in the front seat.
Right.
And she takes me and drops me off right at the state line in town. It was great. She was really friendly woman. But out east, it's just, I'm from Michigan. It's a completely foreign idea to me that the police would ever be.
No, because I don't feel like I've had those interactions here.
No, me neither.
I'm trying to think of any encounters that I've had with the police here, and they have been just, getting ticketed.
Yeah.
Or I think that's it.
Yeah.
Getting ticketed.
Yeah, there's some difference in the culture, I guess. I guess it's the only word. It's kind of cliche, but there's something in law enforcement culture out west that's different from the Midwest.
Yeah.
And
actually, when I hitched out, I was in Massachusetts, and I was heading down one of the back state roads, and a cop pulled over and didn't harass me or anything, but kind of gruffly was like one of those, it's illegal to do that. You shouldn't, can't do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
The hitchhiking?
Sorry, I didn't realize.
Hitchhiking was illegal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then they left, and then I caught a ride shortly after that.
Yeah. It may not be legal, but it's effective.
Right.
Anyway, let's try to get back to the Wyoming thing.
I don't know where we were.
We're still in Wyoming. We're still hanging out on 287, I think. So you're heading north, and I really wanted to get into this because there's the stories that you had, at least from the Wyoming part of that walk, the getting lost and all that, were really kind of fascinating. So you're heading up toward 280. Where were you trying to get to heading up 287?
Medicine Bow.
Medicine Bow, and then
because the idea was go up to Medicine Bow, and then so 287 goes through Laramie, across whatever that one is, I-80.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Crosses that, and then goes into this weird loop that just goes nowhere. I mean, it arcs at Medicine Bow, and Medicine Bow is essentially a hotel. It's the Virginian, the same Virginian that the book is based off of.
Okay.
So that was kind of neat to see.
Yeah.
And it took me 3 days to get up there from crossing the highway.
Okay.
I think. So it was like these little ghost towns. One of the towns was a complete ghost town. One of the ones is basically, it was a general store and a couple farms around it. So it was, maybe 50, 100 people there, something like that. It was a general store I could pop into. That's when I found out Reagan was dead.
Oh.
And then got up into Medicine Bow, and all I remember about that was the Virginian. I had dinner there, and from there I went into this Seminole Reservoir, which is a big kind of national park, and then the Ferris Desert connects with that over to where 287 kind of shoots up, north-south, connecting the two highways that go through Wyoming. So my idea was there's no way to diagonally cut through Wyoming. So my thought was I'll just cut through those, go through the national parks. It was fine going through the Seminole Reservoir, but then once I got to the reservoir, filled up all my water, had a lunch there, and then continued on towards along the northern end of the ridge. That was when it came across the rattlesnake was the first surprise. That one I was just walking along, and I don't know, I'm looking around. It's beautiful out there,
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I hear this rattle going, and I'm about to step on a fucking rattlesnake. I had surprised it as much as it had surprised me.
That's not good.
No. And my reaction was there was a drop off on the right and a sheer cliff or not sheer, but it was a steep incline on the left. And so I don't know, none of this is logical sense when you're watching this happen. You're just thinking, I need to get to the other side and I can't go any other way.
Right.
So I just jumped, and thankfully the thing was still coiling. So they can't spring when they're coiling. Right. And so I just jumped over the snake, and it's sort of like they just stay put for hours afterwards. So it wasn't going to chase me or anything like that, but I was on the other side of it, and I just kept going. But that was a shocker, because had it bit me, I probably would have been dead, because no one knew I was out there. No one would have come out there.
How big was it?
Oh, I don't know. It was coiling. So
yeah, I mean,
I didn't really take a lot of time to look at it. But
did it look huge or a little guy? Or?
I don't know, 3-4 feet, something like that.
Yeah, big enough.
Yeah, enough to bite me.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't a baby. But yeah, I mean, no one would have come out there.
Yeah.
No one's hiking out there. It was fucking, what was that? End of June.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would have just been stuck. Somehow get myself back there, but I did know that the more you move, your limbs, right? The more it spreads. So you want to stay stiff.
Yeah.
And there's no cell reception out there. So anyways,
especially 2004.
Yeah, moved past that, and then weirdly in the middle of a desert came across a swamp that I think was constructed by beavers. So there I was all of a sudden like hopping from these like weird grass mounds, grass mound to grass mound, just latching onto small bushes to keep myself from falling in the water. And it was on the other side of that I realized that my pack had broken. Somewhere in there, it had snapped.
From the jumping?
Well, one pole had snapped. So I took the pack off and tried to like adjust it, and in trying to adjust it, the other pole snapped too. Oh, Jesus. So then I took out my duct tape, taped the shit out of both. I don't know, put them on top of each other and duct tape the shit out of it.
Right.
And I wore it like that for the next 3 weeks. That because of the the brake. Yeah, it's a external metal frame. So the I don't know, metal fibers or whatever, the points coming out of that just dug into my back over 3 weeks of hiking. I have these like two perfectly circular backs on the small, or scars on the small of my back that I like to tell people every now and again that I was abducted by aliens.
You still have them? They're still there?
I don't think so anymore. I think they've faded away, but they were there for a good several years. But yeah, and then shortly after that, I got lost taking what I thought was the pass between the mountains. So it's 2 ranges with a pass in between. So I thought I was taking the pass. Instead, I ended up going up an incline and ended up on the top of the mountain. Was so pissed off about being on top of this mountain and like having hiked all the way up here. I was like, Jesus Christ. And with everything else that had happened, I was like, well, fuck it. I'm not going to get angry. I'm going to at least enjoy this moment and take a picture. That's when I found out my camera was gone. Pretty sure it had fallen in the swamp.
Yeah, right. And all this is while the pack is due. So you climbed this mountain with a pack digging into the small of your back because it had snapped on you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I went down the other side and kind of meandered my way around. By nightfall, I had found power lines. And I had remembered reading, who was it? Dr. Feinstein, the guy who worked on the Manhattan Project. I don't know. Anyways, he had a book of all his like weird exploits, like weird short stories. He's a funny guy, and he's got a bunch of stories. And so I had read that, and I remembered one of them was when he was in college, and his fraternity had dropped him off with a bunch of guys in the middle of nowhere to find their way home, and he had found his way home by following the power lines. And it had something to do with the direction you followed him. Had to do with they either got more or less. But I was going west anyway, so I just followed him west.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And camped out somewhere along there and got into the Ferris Desert. And there's a ghost town there. So I'm walking. It was super windy. It's desert. It's super windy. It's Wyoming. It's all flat. Except for these mountains that just crop up out of nowhere. So there's like weird wind tunnels that are focusing it on you. And it was super windy that day. So I had my goggles on, those ones that look like Hagrid,
Great.
I had those on because I just loved it. It was all like bundled up because it's freezing.
Yeah.
Coming up on this ghost town where the power lines went to, and I'm walking into this town, and I see this like small camper truck coming up a road, also to the ghost town, which the ghost town is the dead end of this road. And we happened to reach the town at the same time.
That's fortuitous.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And we're looking at each other with the same, it was this old couple in there. I don't know, they're like 60, 70 years old. Yeah. And I'm looking at them with the same look that they're looking at me of like, what the fuck are you doing out here? And apparently they had they do a lottery system for hunting areas. Right. And that was their area that they were going to hunt in. And they were just coming to check it out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm walking across country. And so they put me up in their trailer and fed me and gave me a bunch of food. And I'm drinking a bunch of Mountain Dew, I think they had. And I was like, oh, hey, I've been out of touch for 5 days now or something like that, or 4 days. And I had told my mom, I would get in touch with her when I got out, which I thought would be around now, but I clearly have a lot longer to go. Can you go onto my website and sign into the guest book to say like, hey, it was great seeing you or something, so that the other people can see. Later on, I found out that the guest book was actually down the whole time that I was out. So not only was I out of contact for 10 days and lost in the desert, but there was no one, and it was a pretty regular thing on the guest book that people would sign in, like multiple guest book entries per day saying like, oh, good to see you, or it's cool meeting you, or go on, So to have that not have, because nobody knew it was down. right? I mean, no one's checking on it.
Right.
Unless I see that there's nothing going on and call my friend who was managing the website and said, hey, there's no, I think there's something going wrong with the guest book. But because I'm out of touch, I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. So my mom is freaking out back home because she's seeing, nobody's seeing me. Nobody's posting on this guest book the whole time that I'm out of touch. And
Wow.
So anyways, long story short, I got out of there. I made it cross 287 and then got into the Continental Divide Basin. That's where I really got lost for about 4 days. Must have been only 2 or 3 days at that point by the desert, because I was out of touch 10 days. I was lost for 4 in the basin, and it took me 2 more days to get to a town to get online or get to a payphone where I could call and let my mom know that I was fine, and I was gone 10 total. So what's that? That's 4 days, I guess. But you talk about they must have, like the guys driving around in Wyoming, that they must have like pot buried somewhere and they're off, this whole thing.
Yeah.
When I was going through the basin, I went through this area that had this weird mounds, and they looked uniform, kind of. Yeah. And by this time, I was going overland a lot. Right. I was getting off roads and I was walking overland because I was seeing these roads go straight north for miles or, in opposite directions. And I had a map. It was topographical. I just was doing a real shitty job reading it. So I would go overland and just be in literally the middle of nowhere where nobody's going to be driving around. Right. So that was real smart. But but I'm out in this place where there's these weird mounds everywhere. And I swear, I'm so in my head at this point because I haven't seen a person since Medicine Bow, really, outside of that old couple.
Yeah.
Or I hadn't seen a Bear Oil. There's a place called Bear Oil that was creepy as fuck.
What's it called?
Bear Oil. It was like BAR oil.
BAR, bar oil?
Bar Oil, yeah. It's about 5 miles west of the 287. I walked, like a driller's town or something like that. It's so fucking creepy. It's just a giant cul-de-sac around a huge pit in the middle of the town that is just filled with tires. Like people throwing their trash in there. It's like a sinkhole or something, but it's huge. It's like maybe 100, 150 feet across. Something, if I remember it right.
And that's the town square.
I guess
like in the
so. I don't know.
of this
And then
cul-de-sac?
on top of it is I seem to remember on top of it was like an electrical tower or something like that. Or maybe it was an old oil drill or something. I don't know. But it was a big, wireframe structure. And it's just so creepy. So I'm seeing, when I'm walking up that road, I walk down the dirt road that the old couple had come across. I get to 287. There's a diner there. So I go in there. I have a dinner. And then I get out of there and I go walk up the road. About 5 miles was the stretch to Bar Oil. And there's cars passing me, right? It's like 5, 6 in the evening. So everyone's coming home from work.
Right.
I get up there. There's not a single car in the driveway. And there's not a single light in the house.
Where the fuck are they going?
They're all going home. They're parking their cars in the garage and they're pulling their shades down. You can see lights coming out from behind the shades, but it's fucking creepiest place I've ever been to. And then I walked around the cul-de-sac. I managed to see a mechanic, was the only person that I saw out at all. I asked him, I was like, hey, is there like a library around here that I could get online? Because I wanted to check in. I think it was Sunday the day I got there, maybe. And he's like, yeah, there's a library over there, but you should talk to the police chief. I think he told me to do that. Either way, I went over there. I ran into the police chief anyway. Mm-hmm. He looked exactly like Brian Dennehy. But just totally bundled up, big barrel of a guy walking 2 bulldogs, super friendly. I was like, is there a place to camp around here? I'd like to hit the library tomorrow to get online. And he's like, yeah, you can camp in the playground. So that's what I did. I camped in the playground. I mean, the chief of police tells you to do it in a creepy town like that.
You do it.
I'm going to do it. So I did that. Next day, Reagan's dead. And either that was a Sunday or he was dead, but for whatever reason, the library was closed.
Right.
And I couldn't get online and I couldn't do anything. So I was like, oh, whatever. And then the chief of police, he gives me this shortcut, and that's basically what got me lost in the basin, because that was the town that launched me into going into the Divide Basin.
So he tried to give you the short, like a quicker route.
He was trying to help me out, and somewhere in there I got lost pretty easily. And then I didn't see anybody again for a long time.
And then you finally get out where, and how does that go? How does that
I
happen?
got out. Well, for one, I loaded up on water.
Yeah, I was going to ask. You had water.
I had
obviously,
10 liters of water.
Jesus.
I mean, I don't think I did have that dromedary because I remember wanting to have 10 liters of water or just wanting more water, and I got an extra gallon, like a milk gallon thing that I filled up, and I hung that off the back full off my pack. I carried...
I'm curious how much water you actually
10.
left. 10 liters?
I definitely had 10 liters because I remember carrying it all the way through.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was in a desert, and so I assumed there was no water. So anytime I did pass water, which was frequent, I thought it was the last water that I was going to see. So I'd top up anything that I had drunk. And what I was drinking was sparse because I didn't think I was going to have any, and I needed to make it all the way through this basin.
You're in survival mode at that point.
I was in stupid mode because I wasn't drinking anything, and I wasn't paying attention to the fact that I was running across water. So when I came out of there, I carried 10 liters of water through this basin and still came out completely dehydrated and windburned.
Despite having 10 liters of water. And
How
much
that
did you
was the
walk out
irony of
with?
it. 10 liters.
You came out fully loaded and still dehydrated and windburnt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I ended up...
I was trying to give you credit for survival mode, but
No.
if you walked in with as much as you walked out, you probably could have drank some.
Well, I was just like sipping little bits.
Could have drank more.
Right. And then I'd run across the stream and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to top up what I did drink.
Yeah. What were you filtering with? Did you have your MSR at that point?
I was using that like crank pump.
Yeah, the MSR.
Yeah.
So you were filtering and not drinking it out of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's cattle all over the
Yeah.
place.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No, and
Drink
then
out of the taps down in Peru. So.
I found it's fine. I got to...
No, it's not fine, kids. Do not drink out of the taps in Peru. I'm telling you, I don't care what he does. He's got a superhuman immune system at this point. No, it's not fine.
Well, I camped right next to the Sweetwater River. I think it was the last day that I got out, that I was in the basin. And Sweetwater River is a big river. It's not a creek. It's maybe 10, 15 feet wide. What's that, 4 feet deep, maybe something like that, and pretty strong. So I camped there. I had a great time. I drank a lot of water then because it's right next to me.
Sure.
Right, and I'm camped. So I was able to cook a meal, and wash everything and refill all my water that I went through. And then in the morning, 7 a.m, right? I'm all packed up by 7, ready to go. The sun is still, sun's out, but it's light, but it hasn't been out. So it hasn't warmed the river in any way. And I need to get across it. And like I say, it's a strong river.
Yeah, chest deep.
Yeah. So I take my backpack off, throw it on top of my head, get a nice sturdy stick. I think I was worried about broken glass, so I wore my sandals across and waded chest deep into the river with everything that I have
On your head.
on my head against this current that's just dying to push me all the way downstream. Yeah. And this was the one crossing, so if I went there, funneled into a canyon.
Oh, Jesus.
So getting out would have been difficult. But I made it across, and I ended up having to do that. That was the worst of them.
Yeah.
And it was fucking freezing. But
And you're in it almost all the way, almost fully submerged in it.
With what I'm wearing, for the rest of the day.
Oh, you went in, you didn't strip. You'll sleep naked, but you didn't take your clothes off where you went in there?
I think I wore my bathing suit, and I think I had that shirt on it dried out in no time.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you weren't wearing like your hiking pants and your boots and all that, and socks and all that shit. So
no. Like I said, I went in sandals. I didn't have many clothes with me. I had those shorts and I had my pants. And if I fell, all of that was going to be soaked.
Right.
Although no, I think I had everything in like a bomber bag at that point. Mm-hmm. Either way, I made it across, and I was still lost as fuck. The only thing guiding me out of there was the Shoshone Mountains. Mm-hmm. I knew they were where I was going, and I knew. As long as I was aiming towards them, I'd find my place on the map every now and again.
Yeah.
And I'd be like 10 miles north of where I thought I was going to be, or 10 miles south of where I thought I was going to be.
Yeah.
Wandering all over. I was like a big zigzag all the way across. But what got me out of there was I ended up finding the Oregon Trail. and with little markers
Oh, sweet.
along the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I followed the Oregon Trail and the
Being
Mormon
rescued
Trail.
by the fucking Mormon Trail.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Brigham Young.
Yeah. Well, they forged a lot of rivers. So I had to do that a couple times.
Yeah, still.
But I kept, I was
That's
like,
some pretty badass cred there. You know? Wandered through a desert to be rescued by the Oregon Mormon Trail? Yeah.
yeah. And then after that, it was another 2 days before we got to Pinedale.
Yeah, but you're doing the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have this thing about trails, man. I told you about I wanted to do the Santa Fe Trail and had ideas about like biking
Yeah.
slash hiking.
I think that one, oh no, Santa Fe Trail is south, isn't it?
Yeah, it's New Mexico. It's like southern Colorado.
Yeah. No, and this was a bunch of trails. I was going to say Santa Fe might have been one of them too, but there's no way.
No,
That doesn't
I think
make sense.
well, the Oregon Trail I think is like a
The Oregon Trail and the Mormon Trail are overlapping for long times.
yeah, but they're it's not just one trail though. I don't think. I think there are several that sort of merge into it or something.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, the further east you get, because they're coming from all over the place.
Yeah. And this was in you're talking western Wyoming at this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I went into Pinedale, and shortly after Pinedale is like, I think it's Scotts Bluff Jackson. I didn't go through Jackson Hole, but I don't know. There's some junction there or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then up into just south of Driggs and Idaho Falls eventually.
Yeah. So
That's where I went.
you're right around the Tetons.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went just south of the Teton.
Beautiful country.
Yeah.
So you got 2-3 days on the Oregon Trail, and you're finally I guess.
No, just the one day on the Oregon Trail, and then that took me to the highway.
Oh, okay.
And
All
then
right.
from the highway, there was a connecting road, and that's what I followed the next 2 days. And it was
All right.
2 days after that I reached Pinedale
Gotcha.
and was able to call my mom, and
She's happy.
that was 10 days out of contact. It was at some diner, and I had 2 or 3 dinners sitting there just drinking the fuck out of coffee. I was so depressed when I got there. I was so like, because that's the thing is like, you forget what not eating food will do to you.
Yeah.
So I was
let's
just
talk
like,
about
what
that.
the fuck am I doing?
Let's talk
it's
about that.
drizzling.
You obviously didn't starve to death, and you were walking a lot. So what were you
Well, I
doing
was
for
eating
food?
minimally. I was, those hamburger helpers.
It's fine for me, but tell
Right,
people that
right.
are listening, what did you carry and how did you sustain yourself? Obviously, you weren't eating at diners every day.
No, yeah. So what I would carry generally was the healthy amount of Cliff Bars, usually like 10, 12, 15 Cliff Bars on me. I think I bulked up even more because I knew I was going in the middle of nowhere, and I knew I'd need to eat. And then I would have like 2 or 3 hamburger helpers because they're light, they're easy to carry. And, every time I tell people that, they think I use it with the hamburger.
Well, that's what normal people would think. You're talking hamburger helper. The word hamburger is in there. So what?
It is in there, but who would carry hamburger?
They probably think you're nuts. So
No, so all I used it for was the noodles and the seasoning.
And how'd you cook it?
You just boil up water and you just
With
what did I have? A dragonfly?
like a stove.
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
stove.
So you weren't building fires and putting your pot
No.
on.
No, this was with like a little gas tank, white gas tank, and
Right.
and I would use that not very often. I think I used that when I got into the Seminole Reservoir. When I got to the actual reservoir, I used it there because I had water to clean up, and then I used it when I got to Sweetwater River was probably the next time I used it after that. So that's like 4 or 5 days later. And the reason why is, again, because of the water consumption.
Well, people don't realize you
You got to wash.
always have to have water whenever you're cooking in those things. You're boiling water. So what you're cooking, you need water for. And then if you want to stay sanitary, you've got to clean it up.
Well, not just sanitary.
well.
You don't want to have
Bears.
bears, coyotes,
Yeah, right.
pumas,
Yeah.
cougars, shit like that.
Yeah.
So, I would never cook if I didn't feel like I had the water to spare.
That's why I quit carrying that thing, because you have to have a lot of water, at least access to it, in order to really use that stuff effectively. For me, it's just easier to throw. If I'm going to use water, I'm going to just throw it in cold oatmeal or cold ramen noodles and be done with it.
Hitching wise, that's what I ended up doing was getting. Well, no, I think I got that trick from the walk, wasn't it? Because I passed that along to you when you started hitching. Was those cold oatmeal? Packets.
Yeah. I mean,
I was doing that in the walk. Yeah, Ingrid and I were doing that in Georgia.
Yeah, you don't need hot water for oatmeal. You can just throw water in those plastic or the paper.
The little foil wrap
packets.
things. Yeah.
they hold water long enough to let the water absorb into the oatmeal and eat it.
Yeah.
You don't need.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
your
you
bowl.
Just, and you just throw that away. And you don't have any cleanup. You just have to basically wash your spoon.
You just lick your spoon clean.
Yeah.
That's what we would do.
And I like the ramen thing because it's light. It's fucking 20 cents a packet.
Right.
You don't get a lot of nutrition, so you want them. I was carrying Maltese, but yeah, I mean, just to get something in your stomach, give you a little energy, you can throw the cold water on the ramen. It tastes like ass, but you put it in your coffee mug.
Right.
Throw some. I would occasionally throw coffee in there because it tasted like shit. But you get the caffeine buzz out of it. You get a little food in you.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting. Anyway.
Well, that's why, like that's what I was saying at the Sweetwater River. I cooked up there because I had plenty of, and that was the first like real meal I was eating, other than the diner that I'd had like 4 or 5 days earlier. I think I cooked the morning that I was in Bear Oil before I left, or I just had oatmeal or something. But yeah, so other than that, through the basin, I was mostly just eating Cliff Bars.
Let's talk about Cliff for a second because we just talked about the food. You got did you get a sponsorship or did you?
I did,
sponsor?
yeah.
It wasn't really sponsorship. They gave you product.
No,
right?
I just told them I was like, I was manipulative. I wrote to their website on their like whatever, leave a comment kind of thing. And my comment was, oh, my girlfriend and I really love eating your Cliff Bars while we're walking across the USA. Thanks. So I never asked.
Yeah. And what did they say?
And then they wrote back and they said, oh, yeah, if you could get a picture of you guys eating, we'll send you guys 2 cases. And so they sent 2 cases to the next spot, and we did our best to do a decent picture, but they all came out pretty lame.
How many were in a case?
I think it's 12 in a case, so they got like 24.
Oh, that's it. I thought you got more than that. I thought they like sent them to you repeatedly.
No, just the one.
That's cool. That's still pretty good. That's
still nice. I mean,
cheap.
that was big savings. Yeah,
it's what, $30 at least back then, right? Or 25.
They were like $2 or $3 a bar. I think even then, $2.50. I think.
Really?
I think so. I don't know. We found places where they're like $1.25, or we found one place in Georgia where it was like 25 cents.
Well, fuck yeah, you buy them up.
Yeah, we bought the shit out of those. Yeah. But so that's what I was eating. That's why I ate so much.
Yeah.
But that's why I was so hungry when I was walking down the road getting into Pinedale and was just like, I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
I feel really depressed. I was thinking about just depressed. Didn't really it was just kind of like, what the hell am I doing way out here in the middle of nowhere? What am I accomplishing? Nothing. Right. Everything looks like shit.
Right.
And then I got in there and I ate, and literally I remember laughing about this. Literally when I walked another 6 miles after that, and was like, I was thinking about my wake or a funeral, and I was like just cracking up because I was thinking about like a video to leave for that. And I was like running through my head like what I would say. And I was just like laughing. I looked like a crazy person because I was like laughing out loud for 6 miles, and I was like singing and dancing a little bit
you're loopy.
on the road. I was.
Just everything's light. All of a sudden,
I just remember that it was a funeral. It was my own funeral that I was thinking about. That was cracking me up. I mean, maybe that had to do with my mom saying, I just talked to my mom on the phone and let her know I was alive. And she had told me if I hadn't called her that night, she was going to call the state troopers and have them go look for my body somewhere.
Wow.
So I think that probably put me on the funeral mindset. But
I've experienced that several times. Like I would be like, just like one day, just down in the dumps. Everything sucks. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing out here. Why the fuck am I sleeping in the goddamn ditch? Just shut the fuck up, you fucking dog.
Yeah.
That kind of crap. And then the next day, or maybe even later the day, I'll throw my headphones on. I use music a lot. I don't think you did. But I would put my headphones on, and all of a sudden my mood, like, boom. I don't know what it was. Maybe I ate something, got some water in me.
For me, usually it was food.
It might have been. But I would be like just skipping down, zippity-doo-dah, zippity. Everything's fucking wonderful again. I'm waving at cars. Oh, you sweet little dog. Are you singing to me? It's just like, just those moods that you go through. And those peaks, those valleys are really weird. But those light moments, when you're like on the side of the road, I've got, especially when you're hitchhiking. Yeah. And you're like, hey, hi there. And you're getting the scowl back, but you don't care.
Right. Well, that's like that whole scene in Into the Wild, when they have him sitting on the side of the road and he's talking to the apple.
Yeah. That's
like that. Yeah. I love that because it cracks me up.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Totally
I've been there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird euphoria that can kind of stray. And, I think maybe it's an energy where you kind of connect with what you're doing and being out.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, someone could drive by, splash mud all over you, and then punch you in the face, and you're like,
Yeah, thanks. Part of the experience.
yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, right. All
I've
right.
never been punched in the face. Like,
So you reach civilization again. You've contacted your mom. She's now sending the state troopers out to look for your body. And you're somewhere around the Tetons, right? A little bit west of there?
that was in Pinedale.
Yeah.
So, and then, or no, it wasn't in Pinedale. It was in Boulder, Wyoming.
Okay.
Or something like that. But yeah, and then next day or next few days, got out of Wyoming, got into
Idaho.
Boise or Idaho. I don't know. It was a few days of walking to that. I had to fly home. I got into Idaho Falls because I was trying to make a bus. Because I had to take a bus from Idaho Falls to Boise to fly out of Boise to back home in Massachusetts because my cousin was getting married.
Oh, okay.
So I went home for like 2-3 days and then came back, flew back into Boise, bussed back. Oh, and in that flight, they stole my fucking Leatherman.
Remember you telling me about that?
Yeah, I had it strapped to the side of my backpack, wrapped in plastic, checked under the plane, and they cut through the fucking plastic and took my Leatherman. Jerks. So this is why I don't check baggage anymore. Because that happened a number of times.
Yeah.
So then flew back to Boise, bussed back to Idaho Falls, then walked across the Snake River Plain
That's
over
awesome.
to Arco.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Snake River Plain is fucking wide. It was
Yeah.
like 60 miles. I don't know. It took me 2 nights to get across
Yeah.
for sure. I camped just outside on the other side of Arco.
You went through a little bit north. What road are you on here? Is it 20?
20.
Yeah. So you went through north. I took the interstate.
Yeah, that's
down.
where the military came out and was like,
Yeah. That's
don't camp more than 15 feet off the road. Yeah, all right.
Yes,
And actually, that's when I met my good friend Emily.
Yeah.
I was walking along, and the Snake River Plain is just flat, 60 miles or so of just nothing.
Yep.
Just totally flat. And there was electrical storm, all that kind of stuff at one point. Got a really nice picture of lightning striking the ground out there.
Sweet.
Doing a long exposure.
Film camera.
Huh?
Film camera?
Yeah, I was carrying a film camera. Yeah, one day I'm walking along and a really cute girl stops to offer me a ride. And I do I'm walking cross country. And it happened to be that was like 50 feet away from the only rest stop on that whole stretch. And she's like, wow, I got food in my car. You want to eat? And I was like, yeah,
Yes.
I do. 'Cause you're really cute.
Yes. I'm not even hungry.
Yeah. And so we pulled over. We ended up in that rest stop for like 3 hours just chatting it up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. I got a picture of her there. She's got a picture of me there. And she was on a road trip, kind of doing some soul searching, driving around, changing her
Yeah, and you
life.
find each other, right?
Yeah, our birthdays were like 2 weeks apart.
Yeah.
Same age, everything. And we're still in touch these days. Just a really nice connection. I don't know. Yeah, then kept...
How often do you think that
basically
happens?
just kept walking through.
How often do you think that happens? Because I've noticed that a lot of people that have picked me up, this isn't a pickup, but, she stopped and talked to you.
Well, later on, like 5 years later, she told me she stopped because she thought I was cute too. So
Oh, well.
that helps.
Yeah. You feel good about yourself now.
I did.
Anyway, if she was on a soul-searching thing and she thought you were cute, that makes sense. But I wonder how many people, in your experience, maybe we're moving forward a year, but have stopped because they sort of subconsciously or psychologically identify with what you're doing because they're experiencing something.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
I've had people tell me that. I mean, like people like, coming out of upstate New York, I think, going across the Poughkeepsie Bridge, I think was one of them. A guy stopped, he picked me up. He's like, I just picked you up because I haven't seen a hitchhiker in 20 years.
Yeah, I've had that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten that a
People
number of
still do
times.
this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to talk about it. And they want to talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it, I mean, one of the most interesting experiences, you want to talk about Wyoming, was getting picked up in, what's that one in the southwestern corner? Evergreen or Green, I don't know, whatever it is.
Green River?
No.
No, where am I thinking? That's Utah.
Colorado.
Utah, isn't it?
Or maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Somewhere over in Wyoming, I was sitting at a truck stop and I'm hitching out of there. I was just sitting in front of the trash can or something like that, sipping on a coffee. Yeah. Didn't even have my thumb out or anything. I was just sitting there with my bag.
Yeah.
And a guy walks by, a real cowboy kind of guy, walks by, doesn't say anything to me, and it's just, like swips his hand, come on, you know?
Yep.
I was like, oh, okay. So I get up, and I think he did say, like, where you headed? And I was like, oh, I'm going to Rollins.
Yeah.
Because I would always say, Wyoming's so big, the next exit's about 30 miles away. So I would always just say the next exit because you don't want to get stuck in the car. I also didn't want to put them in an awkward
and you can always upgrade your seat later on.
Exactly.
If you get along well.
Right. I would do that for both sides, for myself and for the driver. So if they didn't like me, and then it wasn't awkward for them to chuck me out.
Yeah.
And so anyways, we get in the car and we're just pulling out of the gas station at this point, and he says, like, oh, so what's in Rollins? You can just tell by the insinuation of the voice or the tone of the voice that he thinks that I'm a guy who's a good guy, just, down on his luck trying to get to the next job and, take care of myself or my folks or whatever. And I was like, oh, nothing really. Just I'm trying to, I don't know how the conversation went, but basically it came out pretty quickly that I was like, I'm not destitute or anything. I'm hitching by choice. I'm trying to get to the East Coast for my dad's birthday, and but this is what I'm doing.
Right.
And he goes, oh, and kind of like, you could tell I was getting out in Rollins.
Right. Yeah.
And he goes, well, I'm going to bore you to death now. I've been listening to this tape and I'm going to pop it in. And so he pops in this tape. It's a documentary about Jackson, the President Jackson. And it was at the point where Jackson takes on the banks, the central banks. And that's a story I really like. And this was in sometime in 2009 or 10 or something like that. It was still very shortly after the crash in 2008. And so it starts talking about that. I was like, oh, I really like this part.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is when he takes out the banks. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay. You get a little hook of interest. Like, okay, this guy's not dumb.
Right.
Or not too dumb, at least,
Yeah.
Anyways, it sparked this conversation of me talking about, like, oh, I feel like this is what needs to happen now. Like, we need to get rid of the Fed. I mean, basically it was rebuilt, and I kind of like went into what I know about the 1913, like JP Morgan, all that stuff. And he was like a Tea Partier. Yeah. And so he's really into that. He starts talking about it, and it comes out through this conversation before we hit Rollins that, I'm out here because I don't trust the media. I don't trust what I'm seeing or hearing through the TV, so I just wanted to come out and see it for myself. He drove me all the way to Laramie.
Yeah. Which is a good stretch further than Rollins.
Yeah, it was like a 3-hour ride rather than a half an hour ride.
Right.
And when he dropped me off, he's like, I wish I could buy you lunch because I got to go to this lecture now, but, I really enjoyed meeting you and talking with you. Yeah. And just to, to see that shift is just fascinating.
It really is. One of the things that you have to do, I think, in your own interest, try to engage people in the car. I mean, we've always had the
and on their own terms.
It has to be on their own
it's
terms.
Their car,
right. But a lot of people pick you up. A lot of people will pick you up because they want to talk, they want to hear what you have to say, or they just want another body in the car,
or they want to tell you what they have to say.
Right? Do they want to listen, talk, or just sit? But you have to be able to read that once you get in there, and you have to be able to engage it on their terms, exactly like you said. If they want to talk, you let them, and you don't sit there and argue. Nod your head. Appear agreeable unless they want
but I would also, so there was a trucker from Texas who gave me a ride, and I rode with him for 3 days. He picked me up in Nebraska. He dropped me off in New York, and he and I got along great. But at one point we're driving along. Granted, this was the second day, so we were already pretty familiar with each other.
Yeah.
But he said, out of nowhere, goes, you know what I think about America? You know what I love about America? We didn't spill a drop of blood for this place. He's like, we purchased every little bit of it.
Day-to-day.
And, what do you do there? Do you nod along? Do you nod along because it's his truck?
Yes.
I didn't.
No,
but I was I was like, well, I think there's a couple hundred nations that might disagree with you on that.
That's a really good question. Because I ran into this kid in a truck again, and this guy was like 22. He's brain dead, But he
Right.
thought he was, as I described in the blog, he thought he was the second coming of Cicero,
Right.
like a political expert. And I had to gauge, maybe, and you've been in the truck with this guy
Oh, for
a
sure.
day now, right? So you kind of knew him, and I think you could understand how this would go.
Well,
probably.
and that's why I wanted to say, like, this
Yeah.
was the second day, which
Yeah.
is important. I probably wouldn't have
huge.
done that, like, an
5
hour
minutes
in.
in. Yeah, this kid was, I'm not going to reach him. I am not going to be able to convince him, and he's not smart enough to change his mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to let him go. And I sat in that seat. Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sure. And about 15 minutes in, boy, I've been sitting out in the sun for like 3 hours, dude. I think I need to take a nap. Is it all right? Do you mind? And just to shut him up. But I didn't want to listen to that, and I wanted the ride.
Right, yeah,
Because I
yeah.
had been sitting out in the sun for 3 hours, and I was
Right.
trying to get down to this. He was taking me probably 300 miles up. He just got gas.
Right.
He was going to drive me out. So I was like, all right, I got to, you have to weigh it.
Yeah.
What's the outcome?
Well, no, and I knew
Yeah.
I wasn't changing this guy's mind. But,
But you also
we
knew
did,
that if you challenged him, he wasn't going to throw you out 5
Right.
minutes up the road. So you could actually have a debate after, knowing
Right.
him.
And we did. We had an
Yeah.
interesting conversation. I mean, it spun from, me saying, well, I think there's a couple hundred nations that might disagree with you, and to, like, he starts throwing out the Manhattan Purchase and the Louisiana Purchase and buying Alaska and all that stuff. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, we bought those from European powers.
Yeah, right.
There were people there before that.
Yeah.
And I got into some of the Indian wars, and he said, well, freedom isn't free. I was like, well,
course.
all right, well, that's fair, but, that's not where we started.
Right.
And that kind of ended the conversation. It didn't go much further than that. But I felt good because I felt like I wasn't just sitting there listening to shit that I didn't want to hear without saying anything. But I also wasn't trying to change this guy's mind.
It's a real skill.
Yeah.
It's a real skill to get in a car. And I've talked about this to a lot of people. Like I've turned rides down. Not very, I haven't had to do that very often. But you have to make a quick judgment. When you're getting in the car, you have to look somebody in the face.
Right.
Is this a ride I
Right.
feel good about? And if you don't take it.
Right.
You figure out some reason not to, or ways, and you have a cache of
Have you ever not taken a ride?
a couple. Yeah, it hasn't happened very often.
Yeah, I've never not taken one.
Yeah, I have. It usually they're looking at me really shifty. Mm-hmm. Like we were talking about with the homeless guys.
Yeah.
Look at me up and down. They usually have a really fucking disingenuous smile on their face. They're
Right.
too friendly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's like, well, I ask them, well, how far are you going? And I usually say, well, I'm trying to get farther. That's where I overshoot as an excuse not to get in the car.
Right, yeah.
You see what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, it happens every now and then. When you get in the car, it's a real skill, but you have to understand quickly how you need to approach it. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you read the energy in the vehicle and ride it.
Right, yeah.
And let them sort of
that's true.
determine it.
Right, yeah.
But that starts, as soon as they pull over.
Yeah.
You have to walk up, look them in the eye, and
Yeah, because I think my turn down would be like, I'd have to recognize it right away.
yeah.
Because then I would probably turn to, well, I'm actually not hitching. I just wanted to ask you, is this place over here? Or something
Yeah,
like
right,
that.
right.
Something like that.
For me, anyway, it turns into it's sort of an unconscious act.
It's your
feeling.
gut.
Yeah, it's your feeling. You don't think about it. You don't really, you're not having a cognitive debate with yourself in your mind about whether or not you're going to get the car. You just read it, feel it, do it.
Yeah. No, and I think
move on.
it's kind of like that Olympian that we just saw tonight. The
Oh, she thought too much.
She thought too much. And I
Yeah.
think if you sit there and if you let logic get into that argument, you're going to fuck up.
Yeah. All right, so we're in, you're back in Idaho Springs or Idaho Falls?
Idaho Falls. Well, and across the Snake River Plain. I mean, I don't know how much farther. It's just, basically, I just walked back to Seattle.
Yeah, whatever you
at
want.
that
man.
point.
Yeah, you went through Boise. Or
Yeah.
Did you go
Well,
through-
I met Lex actually along the way. He is an
Yeah.
interesting character.
We can talk about him. We're going to do the hitchhiking stuff, and he comes up later on
Yeah.
when we're in Phoenix after Slab City.
Yeah. So he was kind of just south of Sun Valley.
Yeah.
And walking along on 20, and Lex and Val, they pulled over on their van, and they're asking me if I need a ride or anything. It was my saying, like, no, I'm walking cross country. And he goes, well, shit, I did that on horseback a few years ago, back in the 80s or whatever he said, 70s, I guess. And I was like, no shit. They were super sweet. They're like, did you hit the hot springs? like back the road? And I was like, no, I didn't even see it. No, oh, we're just coming from there. We'll bring you back there. So they drove me back 10 miles, set up their lawn chairs, and waited while I went in and just soaked on my own.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I felt really awkward about it. I stayed like 10 minutes and I was like, oh, I think I should get out of here. But yeah, and then came back. They dropped me off where they picked me up. And they offered to bring me into town and buy me breakfast. And we were just outside of town when they picked me up. So I said, no, I like to walk like every step, you know. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So they dropped me off where I was. And they went and I met them in the restaurant. And we had breakfast. And they said, well, if you make it over this far, we're about 20 miles down the road. And this was the beginning of the day. And they're like, you're welcome to stay with us. It was around 4th of July. That's what it was. So they invited me to stay 4th of July with them. Anyways, they were just really cool. I did. I walked, and at the end of the day, I got to their place and stayed with them for 2 or 3 nights. In fact, they encouraged me to not rush so much.
Yeah.
Along with a lot of other people were encouraging me not to rush so much because I was like pushing all the time of like, ooh, no, I need to make my miles today because that's my budget. You know, if I don't walk at all, I can't spend any money that day. Or I got to make it up with more miles later on. Mm-hmm. Anyways, he was a guy who was born in Czechoslovakia back in 1943. So he was born into Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia. The Nazis had left his family alone. They were a wealthy Christian family. But the Soviets, when they came in and were running the Germans out, they went through burning down all the wealthy homes out of the communist agenda. Mm-hmm. And his family was taken out. They had managed to flee the house, but were caught later on and sent to concentration camps in like 45, 46.
Soviet concentration
camps. He was tortured as like a 6-year-old for I don't know what, but that's why he liked hot springs so much. Mm-hmm. They were torturing him with cold water, you know, in like winter times and stuff. Yeah. So he hated cold water. Yeah. He would not go anywhere near cold water. He wouldn't go in any hot spring that was less than 100 degrees. Wow. And then somehow him and his brother and sister all managed to escape. They were transferring them, I think, or something like that. And they managed to get out of the truck and make a run for it. Got into a tangle with, it was in American-occupied Germany. They managed to get across the border. This is in the early 50s before the wall was up.
Yeah. And he's how old again at this point? He's like 7, 8?
Well, yeah, it'd be like 1950. So 70, 7, yeah. 7 or 8. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
I think his brother was killed in that skirmish. And then the Americans, they managed to get to the Americans. The Americans took him in and they shipped him over to New York. Wow. So then he grew up in 1950s New York. So he had a ton of stories about that as an immigrant, you know, as a refugee immigrant. Yeah. And that was just fascinating to hear about that. Mm-hmm. And then in the 60s, he got into horses. He got married when he was like 20 or something like that. He was over in Vietnam in like 63 or 64, you know, back before anybody knew anything about it.
Yeah, right.
Back when the M16s were melting. Mm-hmm. He would tell me about like firing M16s at the VC and watching the barrel just because they were poorly made in the beginning. Yeah. They couldn't handle the heat. So he had some stories about that. And then when he got back, I think he had a son with his wife, and he lived on Long Island with a horse farm. And it was in the midst of really developing Long Island. Mm-hmm. And they told him he had to get rid of his horses. I think his wife had left him actually at this point. And he always told us, they told me to get rid of my horses. I got rid of them. So he shipped his horses over to Philadelphia. Mm. From there, him and his 4-year-old son started riding their horses across the U.S., following power lines. Wow. Basically. And then they would stop each school year for his son. And
just live there? They just like set up shop wherever they were at and he'd go to school there?
Yeah, what he was doing was he was breeding the horses and working as a farrier, I think. The whole way across. They did that for 13 years. That kid was 16 by the time they got to Boise.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. And the only reason he stopped in Boise was because that's where he met Val. Val was a nurse from Switzerland. I don't know why she was in the U.S., but she was. And they, I don't know, fell in love, got married, settled down, or stayed in Idaho. Yeah.
I guess, I wonder, the thought that entered my head when you were telling me that, it's like, life might not seem that daunting
Right, yeah.
after it starts that way and you experience that to get the fuck out of Czechoslovakia.
Well, and think about the America he's riding across.
Yeah,
It's 1967
Yeah, right.
until 1980.
Right.
It's going through Pennsylvania, Ohio, all those in like 67, 68,
Right around
69.
Kent State.
Yeah,
and,
exactly. Yeah.
counterculture and all that.
The hippies are everywhere.
Yeah, right.
That's an interesting time period.
Yeah, yeah.
To be out there doing that.
And then where is he during Kent State and Altamont?
I don't
Then
know,
everything
yeah.
changes. It's like he's immersed in authentic America during this massive change.
Right.
That had to be fucking fascinating.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do it. Horses hate me.
But yeah, so he was a really cool character that I met. And they treated me like a son, basically. I mean, they were like...
This is one of the few that I've met. They're
snowbirds.
They winter in Arizona. We left Slab City the night. We'll get into all that, I think, in the next one. But they're really great people. We had some really interesting conversations at that place. It was really neat.
Yeah.
Really neat.
Yeah, they're cool people.
So you met these guys right around Boise-ish, right?
I met them in just south of Sun Valley, so in the middle of the state.
Yeah.
And then actually their son, the one who had been on this horse ride, the one who grew up on it, essentially, he was in Boise.
Okay.
And so he put me up. His dad called ahead, and said, "Oh, there's this guy. He's walking cross country," So I met him, Glenn. Actually, that's the same guy who he was managing a hotel. When I came to visit you, and he put me up in the King Suite and told the hotel that I was a journalist and that I should be taken care of in every way.
Yeah, I remember. I met Lex and Val then. They dropped you back off at Lynette's house.
Yeah.
You guys went to a ball game or something.
Yeah,
like
they
that, I
came
think.
by and took our picture in front of their house or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's where I got Boise from because I ran into him and okay.
Yeah, actually down that road just shortly after meeting them, maybe a day or two later after leaving them, I was walking along the road. I used to have the little American flag hanging off the back of my pack. Yeah. That's why a lot of people would think I was a veteran.
Yep.
That wasn't my intention at all, and I would tell them immediately, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Because actually 2 days after I left Georgia was the beginning of the Gulf War. I left March 18th and started March 20th.
Right.
Anyways, this truck swung around and this lady's in there and she pulls up next to me and she goes, you don't need a ride, do you? And I was like, no, how'd you know that? She's like, are you walking across the country? And I was like, yeah. How do you know that? And she's like, well, I did the same thing about 9 years ago, going the opposite direction down this same road.
Nice.
So she put me up that night, and she and I just stayed up for a long time talking about the differences. So that was in 2004. She had done it in 1995. And she was saying, oh, you must love it whenever you get to a post office. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Which would kind of probably be the same reaction if I ran across somebody now who was walking cross country and I, not thinking, would say like, oh, you must love it when you get to a library.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she loved the post offices because in 95, I mean, there wasn't really internet and, she was getting care packages.
Yeah.
So she'd stop in every post office she came across.
It's like the Appalachian or PCT stuff. You have people send you to resupply you along the way.
Yeah, exactly. So she was doing that method.
Yeah.
Just comparing. And she says, back then when I was walking, that Forrest Gump movie had just come out and everyone just kept saying, oh, you're just like Forrest Gump. And I was like, oh, yeah, they still tell me that now. And she's like, seriously? 9 years later, they're still giving you the gump?
I'm just running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was cool, though.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name at all, but she was really cool. Yeah. And she actually met her husband there while walking in that town that she was living in.
Oh, wow.
Going through it, he was a photographer for the newspaper, the local newspaper.
Came out photographer.
Yeah, and that's how they got to know each other. It was her and 3 other friends of hers at the time, all women, left out of Seattle and went to Delaware, I think. And anyways, they got along great. And so he would periodically fly out to wherever she was going as the rest of her friends kind of like fell off that walk.
Right.
And he would walk parts with her, and in the end, they got married.
Nice.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that was Idaho.
Yeah.
And then got into Oregon after that, and kind of went up some back roads. And
Oh, you did go into Oregon a little bit, didn't you?
yeah, I went through LeGrand. We talked about
I knew
before,
that.
Baker.
I always forget that. I always see you going straight from Idaho into Washington, but yeah, you did. You
No, I tried
passed through
to, but you
LeGrand.
can't.
Yeah.
not from Boise.
No, it's hard.
Yeah.
You got to go up to like McCall or something like that. You have to go is it McCall? You go straight north.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know that area very well.
Yeah, we're 3.5 hours in. My faculties are
Right, yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I
the
mean, I don't
geography.
really know what else is left on I mean, from then on, I was just kind of power walking my way
Yeah.
out of it. I
Yeah.
mean, I met some cool people. I met a decathlon athlete.
Mm-hmm.
This is 2004. I met a decathlon athlete who was a Normandy veteran.
Wow, so he was a current decathlon
Yes.
athlete
He was
who
still
had been in Normandy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you figure minimum, he's born in 1926. So what's that, 78?
Yeah, something like that. Your math's better than mine at this point. Yeah.
I think that's right.
Sun Valley, we're through Boise, Lex and Val, and you met what's their son's name?
Glenn.
Glenn. So you met Glenn, yeah.
They had another son. Lex and Val actually had a son.
Yeah.
He was with them in Sun Valley.
Okay.
Can't remember his name,
Yeah.
though. I think you met him, actually.
I met somebody there.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're through Oregon. You've gone through LeGrand. Great little town, by the way.
Yeah. We talked about the decathlon guy, the Normandy vet. Right.
So yeah, we're through Oregon. We're into, I guess, southeast Washington at some point. Right? Where did you cross?
Yeah, I got over to Umatilla,
How did you cross the Columbia?
out of Umatilla.
Okay.
Umatilla was like, yeah, I just went over a bridge there. And then
Where's that in relation to the Dalles? I know that name.
it's still east,
It is.
but
okay.
it's kind of in the center. Like where I came up was kind of the center of Washington.
Okay.
And then we got up through like Yakima, over Rainier.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to this place called the Lone Jack. That was kind of neat. It was like a little restaurant. Kind of a high-end restaurant for, I don't know, mountaineers or whatever. It's close to where you cross the Pacific Crest
Okay.
Trail. And I met a guy who was doing the Pacific Crest in parts. And he was there with his dad, and he was getting ready to do another part.
Yeah.
He invited me to have breakfast with them. I mean, I had gone in to get breakfast.
Yeah.
And he invited me to go have breakfast with them, and we were chatting and telling him about the walk and all that stuff. And it was really cool. He treated me to breakfast, which was nice. I mean, that was a pretty common thing. It was like a 50-50 shot that I would end up paying because other people would anonymous. That was actually another one in Kansas or Missouri. I went to a diner. Some family paid like anonymously, like specifically anonymously. I asked the waitress who it was, and she's like, "I can't tell you." They said they specifically didn't.
Yeah, North Dakota in not Grand Forks, Williston, where the Walmart generosity all happened. You remember that?
Right, yeah.
We'll get into that later. But I was in a diner that night. I'd gotten dropped off, and I was sitting there eating my burger and just gorging. I was really hungry. And a Native American guy, and he wasn't anonymous, but he came over, told the waitress or something that, no, I got this. And I'm like, well, I don't need you to do that. Yeah, I got money. I got this. He was really adamant about it.
Yeah.
And he told me later that his brother had been hitchhiking. He was a hitchhiker.
Oh,
and had
cool.
he'd been hit by a car,
Oh shit.
killed.
Oof.
And this was his way to kind of honor his brother. And I'm like, how the fuck do you argue with that?
Right. Yeah.
I don't need you to pay for this. If it makes you feel good and you want to do this for your brother, let me step back.
Right,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Shook his hand. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate. But it just really, that kind of generosity,
Yeah.
it's not uncommon.
No. I mean, like I said, like half the time that I would be in a place, either I would go to pay the bill and it had already been paid.
Yeah.
I remember in Missouri, there was a time where that had happened. Someone also had anonymously paid the bill. And so I want to leave like a $10 tip.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't count how many times it happened on the trip in 06 or in 16 rather. Sitting back in Fort Morgan, I went to pay tribute to Dennis. I went through there, took the Amtrak from Denver to pay homage, And I'm sitting at the same exit that I was sitting at. And when Dennis picked me up, they went over to McDonald's. It was like 7 a.m.
Yeah, and they just drop it off with you?
Drop off an Egg McMuffin, a hash brown, and a thing of coffee. I've got a thing of coffee. I just paid for it at the gas station, the Conoco.
Right.
Right there. But it's awesome. They can't give you a ride. They're on their way to work. Maybe they're scared to give you a ride, whatever. But they want to do something.
Help. Yeah. This place in Missouri, when I tried to leave a $10 tip for the waitress because I couldn't pay someone else had paid the bill, she wouldn't take that either.
Yeah.
And that's straight for her. And I'm trying to give it back, and she's trying to give it back to me, or like not receiving it. And so I'd put it on the table, and finally another waitress came over, grabbed it, and shoved it in my bedroll, so I couldn't get at it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the common theme. I mean, we're gonna finish Washington up. I mean, you obviously walked around across the rest of Washington into Seattle, and you've got to be just euphoric at this point because you've been pushing since Denver to end this thing, right? Or since Wyoming.
What was nice was, so I'm coming into Seattle. My sister lives out in Seattle, which was why that was kind of the target goal. Yeah. I also liked the diagonal across the country. And so she came out and she met me and walked me in the last 10 miles or so, I think, something like that. Yeah. And she had she's an organizer. She had called news networks and
nice,
putting this thing up on Craigslist,
press release style.
Yeah, made a little party at the end. She made a big blanket that I thought that was the sweetest part of the whole thing. So there was a news crew when they got there and they looked bored as fuck.
Yeah, right.
I get in there and my sister and I had a great visit on the way in.
Yeah.
And come up to this news crew guy. It's this guy, he looks really bored. He's on the B-roll team, and he just looks at me and he puts the mic in my face and he's like, "So, why'd you do it?" I was like,
"Just for this, just so you could be here when I ended it, Sparky."
Yeah, I was like,
"Fuck you."
I don't know.
Go home.
I think that was my answer.
That's awesome.
I don't know.
When did they use it?
I just wanted to.
When did they use it?
They didn't. We watched the news. There was nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I went and I dipped my feet in the water and we had a little picnic. But my sister had made this blanket. So to me, the heart of the whole thing had become this blog that I had.
Right.
Because it had this guest book. And the guest book became a rapport back and forth.
Right.
For these people that I had met across the 3,200 miles that I had just walked.
Right.
And I had people following me all the way from Georgia all the way to the end. There's this lady Bonnie that I met who, I don't know, somewhere in her 60s maybe, who was following me from the beginning and checking in. If she didn't hear from me, she was checking in when I was lost in Wyoming, asking if I'm okay, trying to reach people. Yeah. There was a team of librarians out of a county library in Tennessee who they'd keep checking in. They'd always sign this county librarians, you know?
Yeah.
Same in Missouri. There's another team of librarians who were following me. Yeah. And so anyways, my sister had made this blanket that had the outline, kind of a vague representation of the U.S. With Savannah, Denver, and Seattle starred along the way as the major stopping points. Yeah. And then she had written everyone. She called my friend who is running the website, asked her if it was possible to get the email list of everyone who had signed into the guest book, and then made a mass email and just said, "Hey, I know my brother's getting into Seattle soon. This is his sister, obviously, and he's I'm putting together this blanket, and I know that you guys have all been a major part of this journey for him, and that he seems to have been a major part for you. If you have anything you want to relay to him or say to him, please write me and I'll put it on this blanket." And it was really sweet.
Yeah.
So I get in and I see this blanket hanging there, in front of a picnic and a bunch of people. I mean, some of them were friends of mine who I didn't even know were actually going to be in Seattle. Others were just random people who saw a post on Craigslist that said, "Oh yeah, this guy's coming in from walking across the country. There's a picnic. Why don't you come?"
Woo!
Yeah, and some of them were her friends. And anyways, I get up there and I look at this blanket and I see the notes everywhere. And I see my friend Gus and I see my friend Lee in Denver and I see familiar names. And then I see Bonnie Bruce. I was like, wait a second, she's in the... And then I started noticing little by little that these were a large chunk of the names and the notes that were on there were people that I had met along the walk. And it like blew my mind. One that could even get on this blanket. Like,
Yeah, right.
how do you get in touch with those people?
Right.
I'm not very technologically advanced, so I would, But yeah, it was just a really super sweet thing, and it's still a very special blanket for
Yeah, I've
me.
seen
But
it.
it
You had it.
represented, I had it as a curtain at
Yeah,
the
I
Hoff.
saw that. Yeah.
Unfortunately, because now the sun has faded a lot of what was on there. But
Yeah.
it really was a nice way to wrap up the whole walk, because it was really about the people, and it was about this contact, this communication between me and these people that I was meeting along the way, that it wasn't just fleeting like hitching was. Hitching was pretty much you get in a car, you get out of a car. I mean, some of them
Pretty much,
I
yeah.
stayed in touch with, but not many of them. But with the walk, it was like, I mean, by the end, I had something like 5,000 followers or something like that
Yeah.
on the blog.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just, I mean, that website, the guest book was a huge thing for me, because that was a lot of why I was popping into the libraries every day.
Yeah.
That was the motivator.
Well, you impressed that on me very, very heavily when I started doing my stuff in '08. And that was one of the reasons that I started, one of the reasons, not the reason, but one of the reasons that I actually started the blog, or the actual blog that I did on Blogger, was that I put a guest book up on there based on what you told me. And I didn't get nearly obviously
I didn't either when I did, because I did the same when I started hitching, and it's different.
Facebook was a thing by then. So I think actual social, it reminds me of social media.
I think the event was different too.
The guest book that you did was in 03, 04. Facebook wasn't even invented, I don't think, yet.
Right.
So that was our version, or your version of social media. You had to actually, but it became something that you could take with you. You could take these people and you could stay in contact with people via this guest book. And then when I started and you started hitchhiking in 09,
Right,
Facebook was there.
It's lost its special.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the same. They didn't have to go seek you out.
Right, yeah. It's just if you show up on your
In their
feed.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
Well, and I think the other thing that I noticed was even my reception when hitching as opposed to when walking. My reception when walking had a lot to do with the fact that I was just walking, that I wasn't taking rides, that this was a dream that I'd had since I was a kid and was doing it. Actually, that's another brief story that I wanted to tell. In Georgia, when Ingrid was still with me, and we were down some real backcountry road, walked into one of those gas station diners, and there's three guys at the counter, and we walk in, and I forget what exactly they said, but it was something like, "Oh, I was like, what are you all doing?" or something like that. Real contempt in their voice that you could tell was like dirty hippies, vagabonds, whatever. Yeah. And we're like, "Oh, we're walking cross country." And then there was a 180 flip in their tone that was still not friendly, but you could tell it flipped to trust fund kids. And they said something, it was in the form of a question, but it was like, "Oh, how did you afford to do that?" or something like that. Like in that sense of like, "Yeah, great, you got a wealthy mom and dad." And I said, "Well, I just saved up 6 months I work in a coffee shop. It took me 6 months to save it up, and now we're doing it." And once they learned that I'd earned it, that I had worked at a shitty job to earn it, we couldn't pay for anything in there. It was like, "Let me get you a burger, let me get you Coke, let me get you coffee," and they just loved it. They wanted to hear as much as they could. So I think that was the difference that I saw in hitching. Nobody really gave a shit that I was hitching, except for that one guy in Wyoming that I told you about, who once he heard the kind of motivation behind it, and it sort of fit his interests as well. Yeah.
I've run into, I think, people who were more impressed by the fact that I would get into random cars. You know what I mean? That I had that level of trust and self-confidence in myself to get myself out of any potential situations. That I had the balls to do it. Wanting to see the world without electronic eyes. I still hold on to that. Right. And that kind of resonated with people as well. But yeah, it wasn't. Some people, I think, were impressed more by the balls it took just to get into a random car or truck.
Anything. Whereas I think with the walk, it was like, there was the balls idea as well as this, you're following a dream.
And perseverance, too. I mean, it takes a lot.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to go that far and not quit.
I think the main thing was the dream. I think because everybody's got a dream out there, and few do them or have the opportunity to. And I think they liked that I came that I was doing it.
A lot of people have said, not necessarily give me a ride, but maybe I walk into a gas station or a truck stop, and they see the backpack. They ask me what I'm doing. I just hitchhike it. I've always wanted to do something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but X, there's always that X. You know, that I had kids, or I can't afford it, or I might have a bad back, or whatever.
Well, and they're real X's, you know.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that always grabs me when I get a little discouraged. I guess when I get out there, I'm sick of sleeping in the weeds or something. I remember that. Always a lot of people want to do this. I'm pretty fucking lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty lucky indeed. Hey, thanks for listening again to the Escaping the Cave podcast, the Tonzilla X Pod. On Google Play, also on iTunes, and hey, we are up on Stitcher. Officially. Also over at the ChristopherMedia.net network. Take a trip over there, check out the other shows as well. Got one more episode coming up with Mr. Chris, Friar Chris Dyson, and it's a good one. We really delve into the stuff we sort of collaborated on, the hitchhiking around the U.S. And we have if I do say so myself, a very, very interesting episode that goes into a lot of the stuff from 2008, 2009. So I really do hope you tune in for the next one. I'm contemplating doing another episode in between, but we'll see how that goes. Either way, we'll try to get these things back onto a much more normal, regular schedule now that the move is finally done. So I'll talk to you next time, and until then, so long. Thanks for listening.